Picture the throne room of ancient Egypt, where shadows dance against walls, adorned with hieroglyphs that speak of gods and kings. The air hangs heavy with incense and power, while sunlight streams through narrow windows, illuminating dust motes that drift like tiny spirits. In this sacred space, where pharaohs have ruled for millennia, a confrontation unfolds that will echo through history. Moses stands before the most powerful man in the ancient world, his weathered hands gripping a simple shepherd's staff. The wood appears ordinary perhaps, carved from the hardy tamarisk trees that dot the Sinai wilderness. Yet something about this humble rod commands attention. The way Moses holds it suggests weight beyond mere timber, purpose beyond a simple walking aid. The Pharaoh's court watches with practiced indifference, accustomed to foreign supplicants and their desperate pleas. But Moses is different. Raised within these very walls, educated in the mysteries of Egyptian wisdom, he speaks with authority that makes even hardened courtiers shift uncomfortably. When he raises his staff, the atmosphere itself seems to change, as if the very air recognizes something ancient and powerful stirring to life. What if that staff was never just wood? What if Moses carried something that transcended the technology of his age, device so advanced that witnessing its power could only be described through the language of miracles? The question hangs in the air like morning mist over the Nile, inviting us to peer beyond the familiar narrative into possibilities that reshape everything we thought we knew. The ancient world teemed with mysteries. Egyptian priests could perform feats that amazed even their own people, mixing chemicals that burst into flame, creating illusions with mirrors. And hidden mechanisms, healing with substances that seemed magical, but followed precise formulas passed down through generations. Yet Moses, according to the accounts, consistently surpassed their abilities with apparent ease. His staff didn't just match their demonstrations, it rendered them powerless by comparison. Consider the moment when Moses cast down his staff before Pharaoh's magicians. The text describes it transforming into a serpent, while the Egyptian priests performed the same feat with their own rods. But Moses' serpent devoured theirs, a detail that suggests not mere illusion, but genuine technological superiority. What kind of device could create such a convincing display? What principles of engineering or energy manipulation might have been at work? The implications ripple outward like stones thrown into still water. If Moses possessed technology beyond his time, where did it originate? Was he the inheritor of lost sciences from earlier civilizations? Did his education in Pharaoh's house grant him access to carefully guarded secrets? Or does the answer lie in sources even more extraordinary, contact with intelligences whose understanding of natural law far exceeded anything humanity had achieved? These questions transform familiar stories into something far more intriguing. The 10 plagues become not supernatural interventions, but precise applications of advanced understanding. The parting of the Red Sea shifts from divine miracle to technological mastery of natural forces. The pillar of fire and cloud that guided the Israelites through the wilderness takes on new dimensions when viewed through the lens of advanced engineering. Yet even as we explore these possibilities, the essential mystery deepens. Whether Moses wielded divine power or advanced technology, the outcome remains the same: a small tribe of slaves walked free from the mightiest empire of the ancient world, carrying with them principles and knowledge that would reshape human civilization. The staff in Moses' hands, whether wooden rod or sophisticated device, became an instrument of liberation that changed the course of history. The desert wind carries whispers of ancient secrets, and the stars that guided nomads across endless dunes might have witnessed technologies that make our modern achievements seem primitive by comparison. In the space between miracle and machine, between faith and physics, lies a story waiting to be retold, one that challenges our assumptions about the past and opens doorways to understanding we've barely begun to explore. Meanwhile, in the sterile halls of academia, scholars sift through fragments of evidence like archaeologists searching for truth in ancient rubble. The historical Moses remains frustratingly elusive, a figure whose existence hovers between documented fact and mythological construct. No Egyptian record mentions him by name. No hieroglyphic inscription celebrates or condemns his dramatic confrontation with the pharaoh. The silence of stone and papyrus speaks volumes to those who demand proof written in conventional ink. Yet this absence of direct evidence tells its own story. Ancient Egypt was meticulous in recording its triumphs and explaining its setbacks, transforming even military defeats into divine lessons or temporary setbacks on the path to inevitable victory. The sudden disappearance of an entire slave population, accompanied by catastrophic plagues that brought the empire to its knees, should have generated extensive documentation. Instead, we find a gap, a curious blank space where one might expect to find detailed accounts of national crisis and recovery. The biblical chronology places Moses in the 13th century BCE, during the reign of Ramesses II or his successor Merneptah. This was Egypt's golden age, when pharaohs built monuments that still inspire awe today and extended their influence from Nubia to the Levant. Archaeological evidence confirms the presence of Semitic peoples in Egypt during this period, many working on massive construction projects that consumed enormous amounts of human labor. The ingredients for the Exodus story exist in historical fact, even if the specific narrative remains unconfirmed. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, particularly when dealing with events that established rulers might prefer to forget. Imagine being a royal scribe tasked with recording the reign of a pharaoh who lost his entire workforce to a foreign deity, whose armies drowned pursuing escaped slaves, whose land suffered devastation that required generations to heal. How do you write such a story without undermining the fundamental myth of pharaonic invincibility? The earliest external reference to Israel appears on the Merneptah stele, dating to approximately 1208 BCE. The inscription boasts that Israel is wasted. Its seed is not, suggesting that whatever group bore this name was significant enough to warrant mention in an Egyptian victory inscription. This stone testimony confirms that a people identified as Israel existed in Canaan by the late 13th century, precisely when biblical chronology suggests they should have arrived after their wilderness wandering. Archaeological surveys of the Sinai Peninsula reveal evidence of nomadic encampments from the appropriate period, though connecting any specific site to the biblical narrative remains speculative. The desert has swallowed most traces of temporary settlements, leaving behind only hints scattered pottery shards, grinding stones, evidence of metalworking that suggests more sophisticated technology than simple nomadism would typically support. Recent discoveries at sites like Sarabat al-Qadim in Sinai have revealed Egyptian mining operations worked by Semitic laborers who developed an early alphabetic script. These Proto-Canaanite inscriptions represent humanity's first steps towards simplified writing systems that could be learned by ordinary people rather than requiring years of scribal training. The technology of literacy itself was undergoing revolution in the very time and place where Moses is said to have received divine law written on stone tablets. The question of Moses' education becomes particularly intriguing when viewed through this lens. If he was indeed raised in Pharaoh's household, he would have had access to the most advanced learning of his age. Egyptian priests were accomplished mathematicians, astronomers, physicians, and engineers. They understood principles of chemistry, optics, and mechanics that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for centuries. A man educated in such traditions, then spending decades in the wilderness among nomadic peoples who possessed their own hard-won knowledge of desert survival and metallurgy, might emerge with a unique combination of theoretical understanding and practical skill. The biblical narrative itself preserves details that suggest remarkable familiarity with Egyptian customs, geography, and political structure. The author knew about Egyptian building techniques, religious practices, and courtly protocol with accuracy that speaks to intimate knowledge rather than distant hearsay. Whether this reflects Moses' authentic experience or later scribal research, it demonstrates that the Exodus tradition maintains strong connections to historical Egyptian reality. As we prepare to venture deeper into this mystery, the conventional historical framework provides essential grounding. Whether Moses existed as described, or represents a composite figure built from multiple traditions, the story emerged from real encounters between Egyptian Empire and Semitic peoples during a period of technological and cultural transition. The stage was set for extraordinary events, whether we interpret them as divine intervention, advanced technology, or some combination that transcends our modern categories of understanding. As the sun sets behind the Great Pyramids, casting long shadows across the land of ancient mysteries, we enter the sacred precincts where Egypt, as most learned men, practiced arts that blurred the line between science and sorcery. These were not mere entertainers or charlatans, but the intellectual elite of the ancient world's most sophisticated civilization. In the House of Life, Egypt's combination of library, laboratory, and temple priest scholars pursued knowledge that spanned every aspect of human understanding. Picture the high priest Jans, his shaved head gleaming in lamplight as he grinds precious minerals into powders that will transform base metals into gold, or at least create convincing illusions of such transformation. His fingers, stained with chemicals whose formulas were guarded more carefully than royal treasures, move with practiced precision. Behind him, shelves stretch toward shadowed ceilings, laden with scrolls containing medical treatises, astronomical calculations, and recipes for compounds that could heal or kill with equal effectiveness. Egyptian magic was never mere superstition. It was applied science dressed in religious language, practical knowledge wrapped in mythological narrative. When a priest-physician prescribed ground willow bark for pain relief, he invoked the goddess Isis while administering what we now recognize as aspirin's active ingredient. When temple architects designed pyramids aligned with impossible precision to celestial bodies, they combined advanced mathematics with religious symbolism that concealed as much as it revealed. The Egyptian understanding of optics produced mirrors that could focus sunlight into devastating beams, startling visitors who expected polished metal to serve only vanity. Their knowledge of acoustics created temple chambers where whispered words seemed to emanate from the mouths of statues, convincing pilgrims they heard divine voices. Chemistry allowed them to create flames that burned in impossible colors, smoke that induced visions, and substances that preserved flesh for millennia. These priest-scientists possessed detailed knowledge of human anatomy gained through mummification practices that required intimate familiarity with every organ and tissue. They understood circulation, performed surgery, and created medical instruments whose sophistication wouldn't be matched in Europe for centuries. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to around 1600 BCE, but copying much older texts, describes surgical procedures with clinical precision that rivals modern medical writing. But perhaps most remarkably, Egyptian magicians understood the power of psychological manipulation combined with carefully staged effects. They knew how to use lighting, hidden mechanisms, and coordinated timing to create experiences that overwhelmed the senses and bypassed rational analysis. A priest who could make flames appear from empty air, transform staffs into serpents, and call down curses that manifested as real illness commanded respect that transcended mere theatrical skill. When Moses appeared before Pharaoh's court, he entered an arena where such demonstrations were commonplace. The royal magicians had spent lifetimes mastering their arts, perfecting techniques passed down through generations of carefully guarded tradition. They possessed what we might recognize as advanced chemistry sets, optical devices, and mechanical apparatus whose principles were sound, even if their applications appeared supernatural to uninitiated observers. The contest between Moses and these learned men takes on new dimensions when viewed through this lens. It was not rustic simplicity confronting sophisticated deception, but rather one form of advanced knowledge challenging another. The Egyptian magicians represented humanity's most refined understanding of natural law applied through traditional methods. Moses, by contrast, may have represented something unprecedented knowledge that transcended even Egypt's accumulated wisdom. Consider the strange detail that Pharaoh's magicians could replicate Moses' initial demonstrations. When his staff became a serpent, their staffs also transformed. When he turned water to blood, they performed the same feat. This suggests that Moses' early displays operated within parameters that Egyptian technology could match, at least superficially. Only when the contest escalated beyond certain thresholds did their abilities prove inadequate. The biblical account preserves an intriguing admission of limitation. When Moses brought forth gnats from the dust of the earth, Pharaoh's magicians attempted the same feat but failed. Their response is recorded with remarkable honesty. This is the finger of God. Here were men who had devoted their lives to understanding and manipulating natural forces, yet they encountered something that exceeded their comprehension. Their professional assessment that Moses wielded power beyond human achievement carries weight, precisely because it came from qualified experts rather than credulous witnesses. Yet questions linger in the incense-scented air of ancient temples. If Moses possessed technology that surpassed Egyptian capabilities, where did such knowledge originate? The priests of Egypt had preserved and refined their sciences for thousands of years, building upon wisdom inherited from the earliest dynasties. What source could provide understanding that transcended such accumulated expertise? As we follow this thread deeper into the labyrinth of ancient mysteries, we discover that Egypt itself whispered of knowledge inherited from even more remote sources. Temple inscriptions spoke of wisdom bringers who arrived in primordial times, bearing gifts of civilization that transformed nomadic tribes into builders of monuments that still challenge modern engineering. Perhaps Moses represented not the introduction of unprecedented technology, but the rediscovery of sciences that predated even Egypt's most ancient traditions' knowledge, waiting in hidden chambers for those prepared to wield its terrible power. But another possibility emerges from the shadows of that ancient throne room, where the confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh's magicians has captivated human imagination for millennia. The account describes not just one transformation, but a sequence of events that reveals layers of technological sophistication hidden beneath the narrative surface. When Moses cast down his staff before the assembled court, he initiated what may have been history's first recorded demonstration of competing technologies. The Egyptian magicians responded to Moses' challenge with confidence born of long practice. Each threw down his rod, and each rod became a serpent, a feat that suggests they possessed devices capable of creating convincing biological or mechanical simulations. Ancient Egyptian texts describe wooden serpents that could move through hidden mechanisms, articulated constructions so lifelike that they seemed to breathe and strike. Temple reliefs show priests holding staffs carved with serpent heads, implements that may have concealed more than decorative artistry. Archaeological discoveries have revealed the sophistication of ancient Egyptian mechanical engineering. The tomb of Hessi-Ra contained wooden panels depicting scribal tools whose precision suggests machine manufacture rather than hand carving. Excavations at Saqqara uncovered bronze mechanisms with gear ratios that wouldn't be reinvented in Europe until the Renaissance. If Egyptian craftsmen could create mechanical birds that flew and automata that poured wine at precisely timed intervals, they certainly possessed the skill to construct staffs that could simulate serpentine movement through internal mechanisms. Yet the biblical account includes a detail that transforms this technological contest into something far more intriguing. Moses' serpent devoured those of the magicians, not merely defeated them, but literally consumed their devices. This suggests that whatever Moses wielded operated on principles that could neutralize or absorb the Egyptians' technology. The image of one artificial serpent consuming others implies a form of technological dominance that went beyond simple superiority of design. Consider the possibility that Moses' staff incorporated nanotechnology's self-assembling systems that could not only create convincing, biological simulations, but actually consume and repurpose other technologies they encountered. From the perspective of ancient observers, such capability would appear absolutely magical. One device literally eating others and growing stronger in the process would represent power beyond any framework available to understand it. Alternatively, the staff might have employed advanced biotechnology, perhaps containing dormant biological agents that could be activated to assume serpentine form. Modern synthetic biology has demonstrated the possibility of engineering organisms that remain inactive until triggered by specific environmental conditions and rapidly assume predetermined shapes and behaviors. A bioengineered construct capable of actual serpentine transformation would explain why Moses' demonstration proved superior to mechanical simulations. The contest reveals another crucial element. The Egyptian magicians possessed genuine technological capabilities, but within defined limitations. They could replicate certain effects through their accumulated knowledge and carefully crafted devices. Yet they recognized when they encountered something beyond their understanding. Their eventual admission of defeat came not from lack of skill, but from professional assessment that Moses wielded power operating on entirely different principles. This technological interpretation gained support from parallel accounts in other ancient traditions. Mesopotamian texts describe objects that could transform their shape at their wielder's command. Hindu epics speak of weapons that could assume various forms during battle. Celtic legends tell of magical implements that changed appearance according to need. These scattered references might preserve memories of a technology so advanced that it could only be described through mythological language. The staff's serpentine transformation also connects to broader patterns in Moses' demonstrations. Time and again, his displays involved rapid biological or environmental changes, water becoming blood, dust becoming insects, flesh becoming leprous, then healthy again. This suggests mastery of biological systems at the molecular level, capability to trigger rapid genetic expression or cellular reorganization that would appear miraculous to observers lacking biochemical understanding. Modern biomimetics engineering that copies natural biological designs offers another interpretive framework. A device that could rapidly reconfigure its structure to mimic serpentine movement, complete with realistic skin texture and behavioral patterns, would represent advanced material science combined with sophisticated programming. Such technology might appear indistinguishable from actual biological transformation to ancient witnesses. The consuming of the other serpents adds another layer of technological implication. If Moses' device could analyze, disassemble, and incorporate the materials and mechanisms of competing technologies, it would represent a form of adaptive engineering that exceeds even our current capabilities. The image of technological cannibalism, one device literally consuming others to enhance its own capabilities, suggests engineering principles that transcend conventional mechanical design. As the transformed staffs writhed across the polished stone floor of Pharaoh's throne room, witnesses observed more than mere demonstration of competing magics. They witnessed the intersection of different technological traditions, Egyptian engineering refined over millennia, meeting something that operated according to entirely different principles. The outcome would determine not just which tradition proved superior, but which understanding of reality itself would prevail in the contest between empires. Centuries earlier, the Nile had witnessed transformations that painted its waters crimson with the regularity of seasonal floods. Yet the account of Egypt as first plague describes something far more extraordinary, a change so complete and devastating that it affected every body of water throughout the land, from the great river itself to the smallest household vessel. When Moses stretched his staff over the waters of Egypt, the very essence of life became undrinkable death, transforming a civilization's most precious resource into something that inspired only horror and revulsion. The mainstream explanation points toward natural phenomena that ancient observers might have interpreted as supernatural intervention. Red tides caused by algae blooms can indeed transform water into blood-colored liquid that kills fish and becomes toxic to human consumption. Volcanic activity can inject iron-rich particles into water systems, creating the appearance of blood while poisoning the ecosystem. Such events occur naturally throughout the world, leaving behind historical records of waters that turned red and brought ecological disaster in their wake. But the biblical account includes details that push beyond conventional natural explanation. The transformation affected not just the Nile, but water in wooden vessels and stone jars throughout Egyptian homes. This comprehensive contamination suggests either a distributed phenomenon that operated simultaneously across multiple isolated systems, or the application of technology capable of affecting water at the molecular level, regardless of its container or location. Picture Moses standing on the banks of the Nile at dawn, his staff extended over waters that had flowed unchanged for millennia. If that staff contained nanotechnology microscopic machines capable of self-replication and environmental modification, it could have introduced agents that spread through Egypt's water systems faster than any natural contamination. These molecular-level devices might have altered water chemistry through catalytic processes that converted iron compounds into forms that created the appearance of blood while rendering the water toxic to biological systems. The technology required for such comprehensive environmental modification would represent mastery of chemistry and biology that exceeds our current capabilities. Yet the effects described complete transformation of water chemistry, accompanied by mass death of aquatic life aligned with what advanced molecular engineering might achieve. Self-replicating nanomachines programmed to alter specific chemical bonds could theoretically spread through interconnected water systems, creating coordinated changes across vast geographical areas. Ancient Egyptian records preserve accounts of the Nile running red during times of crisis, but these typically described localized phenomena lasting days rather than weeks. The plague described in Exodus affected all water sources simultaneously and persisted long enough to exhaust Egyptian reserves and force desperate digging for groundwater. This comprehensive and sustained transformation suggests either unprecedented natural disaster or artificial intervention operating on principles unknown to Egyptian science. The psychological impact of turning water into blood reveals sophisticated understanding of human perception and cultural symbolism. In Egyptian religious thought, water represented life, purity, and divine blessing. The Nile itself was worshipped as a god whose annual floods brought fertility and prosperity. Transforming this sacred element into something that resembled the vital fluid of life while delivering only death would have struck at the deepest foundations of Egyptian worldview. Yet the account preserves another intriguing detail. Pharaoh's magicians managed to replicate the effect on a smaller scale, turning additional water to blood through their own methods. This suggests that the initial transformation, while devastating in scope, operated within parameters that Egyptian technology could partially understand and reproduce. Their ability to create similar effects, even in limited quantities, indicates that Moses' demonstration employed principles that weren't entirely beyond Egyptian scientific comprehension. The broader pattern of plagues reveals systematic targeting of Egypt's ecological and economic foundations. The water supply represented just the first domino in a carefully orchestrated collapse of natural systems. If Moses possessed technology capable of precise biological and chemical manipulation, the transformation of water might have been deliberately designed to prepare the environment for subsequent interventions that would cascade through Egypt's interconnected ecosystems. Modern understanding of aquatic chemistry offers additional interpretive possibilities. Certain compounds can trigger rapid bacterial growth that consumes oxygen while producing toxins and pigments that create blood-like coloration. Other substances can destabilize cellular membranes in aquatic organisms, causing mass die-offs while releasing hemoglobin that colors the water red. Such effects could theoretically be triggered by introducing specific catalysts or biological agents into water systems. The persistence of the contamination suggests either slow-acting chemical processes that continued transforming water supplies over time, or ongoing technological intervention that maintained the altered state. If Moses' staff could generate directed energy fields or emit programmed biological agents, it might have sustained the transformation for as long as necessary to achieve desired political and psychological effects. As Egyptian servants dug frantically around the riverbanks, searching for uncontaminated groundwater, they witnessed the beginning of a systematic demonstration that would challenge every assumption about the natural order. The transformation of the Nile from source of life to agent of death marked not just the opening move in a contest between Moses and Pharaoh, but the first public display of technology so advanced that it could rewrite the fundamental chemistry of existence itself. As the climate shifted toward an unprecedented crisis, Egypt found itself enveloped in darkness so complete that it could be felt, blackness that pressed against human skin like a living thing and rendered even the brightest flames incapable of illuminating more than arm's length. For 3 days, the land that had given birth to civilization lay trapped in midnight at noon, while across the border in Goshen, the Israelites continued their daily activities under normal sunlight. This selective darkness presents one of the most technically challenging aspects of the plague narrative. Natural explanations struggle to account for localized blackness that affects one population while leaving their immediate neighbors untouched. Solar eclipses last minutes, not days, and create uniform darkness across their shadow path. Volcanic eruptions can generate ash clouds that block sunlight, but such phenomena spread according to wind patterns rather than ethnic boundaries. The precision of this darkness affecting Egyptians, while sparing Israelites, suggests intervention, operating on principles that transcend conventional meteorology. Ancient astronomical records from civilizations around the world preserve accounts of sudden darkness that lasted for days. Chinese chronicles describe periods when the sun disappeared and stars became visible at midday. Mesopotamian tablets record times when darkness fell across the land like a blanket that could not be lifted. These scattered references might document natural phenomena, but they could also preserve memories of technological interventions that affected atmospheric conditions on regional scales. Consider the possibility that Moses possessed devices capable of manipulating electromagnetic fields in Earth's upper atmosphere. By generating specific interference patterns in the ionosphere, such technology could theoretically create localized areas where sunlight failed to penetrate while leaving adjacent regions unaffected. The darkness would seem supernatural to ground observers, but it would actually represent a sophisticated understanding of atmospheric physics and electromagnetic manipulation. The description of darkness that could be felt suggests more than mere absence of light. This implies a physical substance, perhaps artificially generated particles or fields that interacted with human nervous systems to create tactile sensations. Certain electromagnetic frequencies can indeed produce physical effects, ranging from disorientation to the perception of pressure against the skin. Technology capable of generating such fields selectively could create the reported experience of tangible darkness. Modern research into plasma physics offers another interpretive framework. Under specific conditions, atmospheric plasma can absorb visible light while remaining virtually invisible itself, creating pockets of darkness that seem to have physical substance. Such phenomena occur naturally during certain auroral displays, but generating them artificially would require technology capable of precise electromagnetic field manipulation on massive scales. The 3-day duration of this darkness aligns with other elements in the plague sequence that suggest careful timing and systematic application. Rather than random divine wrath, the plagues follow a logical progression that systematically dismantles Egypt's ecological and economic foundations. The darkness arrives at precisely the moment when Egyptian society had been sufficiently weakened by previous disasters to maximize psychological impact while minimizing the risk of organized resistance. Ancient Egyptian records preserve references to similar periods of darkness, but these typically occurred during times of political upheaval or foreign invasion. The connection between darkness and social collapse appears repeatedly in Egyptian historical texts, suggesting that unusual atmospheric phenomena may have accompanied previous civilizational crises. Whether these represented natural disasters or technological interventions remains an open question. The selective nature of the plague affecting Egyptians, while sparing Israelites, raises profound questions about the mechanisms involved. If Moses possessed advanced technology, it would need the capability to distinguish between different populations occupying the same geographical region. This could suggest identification systems that recognize genetic markers, cultural practices, or artificial markers that differentiated target populations. Alternatively, the selectivity might reflect warning and protective measures provided to the Israelite community. If Moses possessed knowledge of impending atmospheric manipulation, he could have distributed protective devices or instructions that shielded his people from the effects while leaving the Egyptians exposed. The darkness that could be felt might have resulted from electromagnetic fields that required specific countermeasures to avoid harmful exposure. The psychological impact of sustained darkness extends beyond mere inconvenience to fundamental disruption of human circadian rhythms and social organization. 3 days without natural light would have disoriented Egyptian society, disrupted agricultural activities, and created conditions of panic that made organized resistance nearly impossible. This suggests a strategic understanding of biological and psychological warfare that transcends simple demonstration of power. Ancient traditions from around the world speak of times when the sun failed to rise, when darkness covered the earth like a funeral shroud, when the natural order itself seemed suspended. These scattered memories might preserve accounts of natural disasters, but they could also document interventions by intelligences whose understanding of atmospheric physics enabled them to manipulate the very sources of light and darkness. As Egyptian priests desperately performed rituals to restore the sun god Rhea's journey across the sky, they confronted evidence that challenged their deepest assumptions about divine power and natural law. The darkness that engulfed their civilization, while sparing their slaves, demonstrated technological capabilities that rendered their accumulated wisdom obsolete, preparing the stage for even more extraordinary demonstrations that would reshape the ancient world as understanding of what was possible. But another possibility emerges from the swamplands of the Nile Delta, where the ecological balance that had sustained Egyptian civilization for millennia began unraveling in ways that seem almost orchestrated. The progression from water turned to blood through successive waves of biological disaster reveals patterns that suggest either remarkable natural coincidence or systematic intervention in Egypt's interconnected ecosystems. Following the contamination of water sources, Egypt found itself overwhelmed by frogs emerging from every body of water throughout the land. These amphibians invaded homes, filled kneading bowls, and crowded into beds where Egyptians sought rest from the mountain crisis. The account describes numbers beyond normal population fluctuations, a biological explosion that transformed Egypt's landscape into a writhing carpet of amphibian life. Ecological science offers a framework for understanding such phenomena. When aquatic ecosystems suffer catastrophic disruption, surviving species can experience population explosions as competition disappears and food sources become abundant. Frogs, being adaptable amphibians capable of surviving in degraded aquatic environments, might indeed proliferate dramatically following the kind of water contamination described in the first plague. Yet the scale and timing of this amphibian invasion pushes beyond conventional ecological explanation. Normal population explosions occur over months or years as reproductive cycles respond to environmental changes. The biblical account suggests transformation occurring within days, a timeline. That implies either unprecedented natural disaster or artificial acceleration of biological processes. Picture Moses extending his staff over the rivers and canals that crisscrossed Egyptian civilization. If that device could introduce biological agents designed to stimulate amphibian reproduction while providing environmental conditions that supported explosive population growth, it might trigger the kind of coordinated biological emergence described in ancient texts. Targeted pheromones or growth hormones could theoretically accelerate natural reproductive cycles, while modified nutrients could sustain population levels far beyond normal ecological limits. The subsequent plague of flies presents an even more intriguing biological puzzle. These insects apparently discriminated between Egyptian and Israelite territories, swarming throughout Egypt while avoiding Goshen entirely. Such selective behavior suggests either remarkable natural phenomenon or guided biological agents programmed to recognize specific environmental markers or genetic signatures. Modern research into insect behavior reveals sophisticated navigation systems that respond to chemical signatures, electromagnetic fields, and genetic markers. Artificially modified insects could theoretically be programmed to avoid areas marked with specific pheromones or to target populations carrying particular genetic characteristics. Such biological engineering would represent technology far in advance of anything achieved in our contemporary world, yet it offers a theoretical framework for understanding apparently impossible selectivity. The progression continues with livestock disease that kills Egyptian animals while sparing those belonging to Israelites. This selective mortality pattern again suggests either unprecedented natural phenomenon or biological agents capable of distinguishing between genetically similar populations based on subtle markers. If Moses possessed biotechnology that could identify and target specific genetic lines, such discrimination becomes theoretically possible. The plague of boils affecting humans and animals throughout Egypt represents the culmination of this biological warfare sequence. Skin lesions that appear simultaneously across a vast population suggest either coordinated infectious disease or exposure to environmental agents that trigger similar physiological responses. The account specifies that even Pharaoh's magicians became afflicted, unable to stand before Moses due to their painful condition. These cascading biological disasters reveal systematic understanding of ecological relationships and biological vulnerabilities that surpasses anything available to ancient science. Each plague builds upon previous environmental degradation while preparing conditions for subsequent interventions. The sequence suggests strategic thinking that views Egypt's civilization as an interconnected system vulnerable to coordinated biological attack. Consider the possibility that Moses possessed devices capable of releasing programmed biological agents into Egypt's environment, microscopic organisms designed to target specific ecological niches while avoiding others. Such biological weapons could theoretically be calibrated to affect particular species, genetic lines, or geographical regions while leaving others untouched. The precision described in the plague accounts aligns with what advanced biotechnology might achieve. The psychological impact of these biological invasions cannot be underestimated. Egyptians found their most intimate spaces invaded by creatures that normal life kept at manageable distances. Their livestock, representing wealth and food security, died while their slaves' animals remained healthy. Their own bodies became afflicted with painful lesions, while those they oppressed remained unmarked. Each plague demonstrated not just raw power, but sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social vulnerability. Ancient Egyptian medical texts reveal remarkable knowledge of disease transmission, parasite life cycles, and biological relationships between species. Egyptian physicians understood that certain illnesses followed predictable patterns and could be influenced by environmental conditions. Yet the plagues described in Exodus operated beyond anything their accumulated medical wisdom could explain or counter. As swarms of flies darkened Egyptian skies, while avoiding Israelite settlements entirely. Witnesses observed biological behavior that challenged every assumption about natural law. The creatures that had served Egyptian civilization for millennia suddenly turned against their former masters, responding to influences that transcended normal ecological relationships and hinted at technologies capable of rewriting the very foundations of biological existence. What if these stones were already ancient before the pharaohs claimed dominion over Egypt? The question haunts the shores of the Red Sea, where one of history's most iconic miracles unfolded, against a backdrop of geological mysteries that may hold keys to understanding how Moses accomplished the impossible. Standing at the edge of waters that had never known division, facing the approaching thunder of Pharaoh's most elite chariot corps, Moses raised his staff and commanded the sea itself to yield passage for his people. The mainstream explanation points to natural phenomena that could theoretically create temporary land bridges across shallow bodies of water. Strong winds sustained for hours can push water aside, exposing sections of seafloor for brief periods before tidal forces restore normal levels. Seismic activity can trigger underwater landslides that temporarily alter water depth and flow patterns. Tsunami events create powerful suctions that can drain coastal areas before devastating waves return. Yet the biblical account preserves details that challenge purely natural explanations. The waters stood up like walls on either side of the passage, maintaining vertical stability for hours while millions of people, livestock, and possessions crossed on dry ground. This suggests not mere wind-driven water displacement, but active maintenance of structural integrity that defied gravitational forces. The sea remained parted long enough for the entire Israelite population to cross, then closed with precise timing that trapped pursuing Egyptian forces. Archaeological surveys of potential crossing sites have revealed seafloor topography that could support temporary land bridges under specific conditions. The Gulf of Suez contains areas where underwater ridges approach surface levels during low tides. Satellite imagery has identified submerged formations that might become exposed under extraordinary meteorological circumstances. Yet none of these natural features could maintain the stability described in ancient accounts without continuous technological intervention. Consider the possibility that Moses possessed devices capable of manipulating gravitational or electromagnetic fields on massive scales. Certain theoretical physics models suggest that properly configured energy fields could create localized alterations in gravitational effects, potentially enabling water to maintain vertical configurations that would normally collapse immediately. Such technology would represent understanding of fundamental forces that transcends our current scientific capabilities. The account specifies that Israelites crossed on dry ground rather than muddy seafloor, suggesting rapid dehydration of exposed surfaces. This detail implies either extraordinary natural conditions or technological intervention that could extract moisture from submarine sediments within hours. Advanced materials science might theoretically enable devices that could rapidly alter soil composition through molecular manipulation, converting waterlogged mud into stable walkways. Ancient flood myths from cultures worldwide preserve similar accounts of waters that parted to allow human passage or stood in walls to protect chosen populations. Mesopotamian texts describe gods who divided rivers and seas during times of crisis. Hindu epics speak of weapons that could part oceans and create temporary passages through bodies of water. These scattered references might preserve memories of technological capabilities that periodically manifested throughout ancient history. The precise timing of the sea's closure adds another layer of technological implication. Egyptian chariots had entered the passage before the waters returned, suggesting that Moses could control exactly when natural forces resumed normal operation. Such temporal precision implies either prophetic knowledge of natural phenomena or active control over the mechanisms, maintaining the water as a natural configuration. Modern understanding of fluid dynamics offers additional interpretive frameworks. Under specific acoustic conditions, sound waves can create standing wave patterns in liquid media that might theoretically maintain vertical water formations for limited periods. Electromagnetic fields can influence the behavior of water molecules in ways that alter surface tension and flow characteristics. While maintaining such effects across kilometers of seawater would require enormous energy expenditures, advanced technology might theoretically achieve such manipulation. The account preserves Egyptian perspectives on these events through their desperate pursuit of escaping slaves. Pharaoh's forces possessed the ancient world's most advanced military technology, including chariots designed for maximum speed and maneuverability. Their willingness to follow the Israelites into the passage suggests either supreme confidence in their ability to complete the crossing before conditions changed, or intelligence indicating that the phenomenon would remain stable long enough for military operations. The psychological impact of witnessing such environmental manipulation would have been profound for all involved. Israelites experienced liberation through demonstration of power that transcended anything in their historical experience. Egyptians confronted evidence that their accumulated understanding of natural law was inadequate to explain or counter the forces arrayed against them. The parting of the sea became a dividing line not just between populations, but between different understandings of what was possible in the natural world. Geological studies of the Red Sea region have identified evidence of ancient seismic activity that could have contributed to unusual tidal phenomena during the relevant historical period. Underwater archaeological surveys have discovered artifact concentrations that might represent remains of ancient military equipment in areas consistent with biblical crossing sites. While such findings don't prove the literal accuracy of traditional accounts, they suggest that extraordinary events occurred in this region during the approximate time frame suggested by biblical chronology. As morning light revealed an empty seabed where mighty waters had flowed for millennia, witnesses on both sides of the miraculous divide confronted evidence that fundamental assumptions about natural law might be far more limited than they had imagined. The sea that had served as Egypt's protective barrier had become an instrument of their slaves' liberation, responding to influences that operated according to principles that challenged everything ancient science thought it understood about the nature of physical reality. As the climate shifted towards something unprecedented in human memory, the escaped Israelites found themselves guided through trackless wilderness by phenomena that defied every conventional explanation. By day, a pillar of cloud provided shade and direction across sun-baked expanses where temperatures could kill the unprepared within hours. By night, a pillar of fire illuminated their path while providing warmth against desert cold that could freeze the unwary before dawn. These guiding lights maintained consistent presence for 40 years, leading nearly 2 million people through terrain that should have swallowed them without trace. The consistency and controllability of these phenomena suggest technological rather than purely natural origins. Natural cloud formations follow atmospheric pressure patterns and wind currents that would make sustained directional guidance impossible. Lightning occurs in brief, unpredictable bursts rather than sustained illumination suitable for nighttime navigation. Yet the biblical account describes phenomena that provided reliable guidance and environmental protection across decades of continuous operation. Consider the possibility that Moses possessed aerial devices capable of generating visible markers while providing practical support for desert survival. Advanced plasma technology could theoretically create controlled atmospheric phenomena that would appear as clouds during daylight hours while switching to luminous fire effects after dark. Such devices could operate through electromagnetic field manipulation that would seem miraculous to observers, lacking understanding of plasma physics. Ancient astronomical records from various civilizations preserve accounts of unusual atmospheric phenomena that appeared during times of significant population movement or civilizational transition. Chinese chronicles describe guest stars that remained visible for months, providing guidance for travelers across vast distances. Mesoamerican codices document periods when unusual lights appeared in specific geographical regions, seemingly responding to human activity rather than natural celestial cycles. The practical functions of these guiding phenomena extend beyond mere navigation. The pillar of cloud provided shade during scorching daylight hours when desert temperatures could reach lethal levels. This suggests technological capability to create localized atmospheric conditions that moderated environmental extremes across a wide area. The pillar of fire offered illumination and warmth during nights when desert temperatures could drop below freezing, demonstrating energy generation and distribution systems that sustained large populations. Modern understanding of plasma physics reveals that properly configured electromagnetic fields can indeed create sustained luminous phenomena in atmospheric conditions. Research into ball lightning and similar anomalous atmospheric events has demonstrated that plasma formations can maintain structural integrity for extended periods under specific energy input conditions. Scaling such phenomena to the size and duration described in biblical accounts would require technological capabilities that exceed our current achievements, but the underlying principles remain theoretically sound. The selectivity of these phenomena providing benefits to Israelites while remaining visible to surrounding populations suggests sophisticated control systems that could discriminate between different groups occupying the same geographical region. If Moses possessed devices that could generate beneficial effects for specific populations while remaining merely observable to others, such technology would represent advanced understanding of biological identification and targeted energy delivery. Archaeological surveys of traditional Exodus routes have identified unusual magnetic anomalies in rock formations that could indicate exposure to powerful electromagnetic fields during the relevant historical period. Certain mineral deposits show characteristics consistent with sustained high-energy phenomena that exceed anything produced by known geological processes. While such evidence remains circumstantial, it suggests that extraordinary events involving significant energy expenditure occurred in these regions. The account preserves details suggesting that these phenomena responded to human direction rather than following predetermined patterns. When the Israelites needed to rest, the pillars would halt. When enemies approached, the cloud could provide concealment or the fire could serve as barrier. This responsiveness implies either conscious intelligence guiding the phenomena or technological systems capable of responding to environmental conditions and human requirements. Ancient traditions from nomadic peoples worldwide include references to guiding lights that appeared during critical migration periods. Bedouin folklore speaks of mysterious fires that led tribes to water sources during desperate circumstances. Native American traditions describe spirit lights that guided peoples across vast territories during times of tribal movement. These scattered accounts might preserve memories of technological interventions that periodically assisted human populations during crucial transitions. The duration of these phenomena, 40 years of continuous operation, represents perhaps the most technologically challenging aspect of the account. Sustaining artificial atmospheric effects across such extended timeframes would require energy sources and maintenance systems that far exceed anything achieved by contemporary science. This suggests either energy generation capabilities that transcend our understanding of thermodynamics or connection to power sources beyond terrestrial origins. The psychological impact of living under such constant supernatural guidance would have profoundly shaped Israelite cultural development. Multiple generations grew up experiencing daily evidence that their survival depended on forces beyond natural law. This would have created social cohesion and religious conviction that could sustain a people through decades of hardship while building foundations for civilizational achievements that influenced subsequent human history. As these mysterious phenomena led the Israelites across landscapes where whole armies had vanished without trace, witnesses observed technology that bridged the gap between terrestrial engineering and capabilities that seemed to originate beyond Earth itself. The pillars of fire and cloud became symbols, not just of divine guidance, but of technological mastery that hinted at intelligences whose understanding of natural law enabled them to manipulate the very elements that determined survival in humanity's most challenging environments. But another possibility emerges from the pre-dawn hours in the wilderness, when hungry millions awoke to find their campsite covered with small, flake-like substances that tasted of honey and provided complete nutritional sustenance. Each morning brought fresh manna appearing with the dew, sufficient for the day's needs, but spoiling if stored overnight, except on the sixth day, when it could be preserved for the Sabbath without decay. This precision of timing and controlled biochemistry suggests technological processes operating on principles that transcend natural food production. The account describes manna as appearing spontaneously across hundreds of square miles of desert terrain, calibrated exactly to feeding requirements of nearly 2 million people plus their livestock. Natural explanations point toward various desert phenomena that could theoretically provide edible substances, crystallized tree sap, insect secretions, or fungal growths that appear under specific atmospheric conditions. Yet none of these natural sources could sustain the scale, consistency, and nutritional completeness described in biblical texts. Picture the vast Israelite encampment stretching across valley floors between ancient mountain ranges, where families emerged from their tents each morning to gather sustenance that had materialized overnight like crystalline dewdrops on every surface. If Moses possessed biotechnology capable of atmospheric food synthesis, such devices might have operated through molecular assembly processes that converted ambient materials into nutritionally complete substances designed for human consumption. Ancient texts preserve references to similar phenomena from other traditions and geographical regions. Mesopotamian accounts describe periods when gods provided sustenance that fell from heaven during times of crisis. Hindu epics speak of devices that could produce unlimited food through technological rather than agricultural means. These scattered references might preserve memories of technological capabilities that periodically manifested throughout ancient history. The biochemical precision of manna production suggests sophisticated understanding of human nutritional requirements and metabolic processes. The substance apparently provided complete sustenance without deficiency diseases, supporting active lifestyles across diverse age groups for decades. This level of nutritional optimization would require detailed knowledge of protein synthesis, vitamin production, and mineral requirements that exceeds anything available to ancient agricultural science. Modern research into molecular gastronomy and synthetic biology offers interpretive frameworks for understanding such phenomena. Laboratory techniques can already convert atmospheric carbon dioxide and nitrogen into edible proteins through artificial synthesis processes. Scaling such technology to support millions of people would require enormous energy expenditures and sophisticated distribution systems. But the underlying principles remain theoretically sound. The timing constraints built into manna production daily appearance, rapid spoilage, weekend preservation suggest technological systems programmed with complex operational parameters. Such precise biochemical control implies devices capable of manipulating molecular structures at will, creating substances with predetermined characteristics that could be modified according to specific requirements or circumstances. The account specifies that manna adapted to individual preferences, tasting different to different people while maintaining identical nutritional properties. This suggests either psychological effects that influenced perception or technological capability to produce substances that interacted with individual sensory systems in personalized ways. Such adaptive food production would represent biotechnology that responds to genetic or neurological characteristics of individual consumers. Archaeological surveys of traditional wilderness routes have failed to identify evidence of agricultural activities sufficient to support large populations during the relevant historical period. Yet isotopic analysis of human remains from later periods shows nutritional profiles consistent with complete dietary requirements being met through non-agricultural sources. This circumstantial evidence suggests that extraordinary nutritional support systems operated in desert regions where conventional food production would have been impossible. The psychological and social implications of receiving daily sustenance through apparently supernatural means would have profoundly shaped Israelite cultural development. Complete dependence on mysterious food sources would have reinforced religious conviction while demonstrating technological capabilities that transcended normal human achievement. This experience would have prepared the population for accepting other demonstrations of advanced knowledge that exceeded their understanding. Ancient traditions from various nomadic cultures include references to periods when survival depended on sustenance that appeared without human effort. Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories speak of ancestral beings who provided food that materialized in the landscape. Arctic peoples preserve accounts of times when unknown sources sustained communities through periods when normal hunting and gathering proved inadequate. The energy requirements for synthesizing complete nutrition for millions of people daily across decades would represent enormous technological achievement. Such capabilities would require either energy generation systems that transcend our understanding of thermodynamics, or access to power sources beyond terrestrial origins. The sustained operation of manna production suggests technological infrastructure operating on principles that challenge fundamental assumptions about energy and matter. The selective nature of manna distribution, appearing only in Israelite camps while avoiding surrounding territories, raises questions about the mechanisms involved. If Moses possessed devices capable of targeted molecular synthesis, such technology would need sophisticated identification systems that could distinguish between different populations occupying similar geographical regions. This implies understanding of biological markers or artificial identification methods that enabled precise control over technological effects. As morning light revealed fresh sustenance covering the desert floor like edible snow, witnesses observed technology that dissolved the boundaries between terrestrial engineering and capabilities that seemed to transcend the natural order itself. The manna that sustained Israel through wilderness wandering became evidence of technological mastery that hinted at intelligences whose understanding of matter and energy enabled them to create abundance in the midst of desolation. Water represents the fundamental requirement for human survival. Yet in the arid wilderness where Moses led his people, this most precious resource existed only in carefully guarded oases, separated by deadly expanses of sun-baked stone. When nearly 2 million Israelites complained of thirst that threatened to trigger rebellion, Moses struck a massive rock with his staff, and water gushed forth in quantities sufficient to sustain the entire population, plus their livestock. This demonstration of hydroengineering on impossible scales suggests technological capabilities that transcend conventional understanding of groundwater access. The account preserves specific details that challenge purely miraculous interpretation. Moses struck the rock at a particular location, suggesting knowledge of underground water sources rather than random divine intervention. The water flow continued indefinitely, providing sustained supply rather than brief miraculous provision. These details imply technological understanding of geological structures and hydrodynamics that enabled precise location and extraction of subsurface water reserves. Archaeological surveys of the Sinai Peninsula have revealed extensive underground aquifer systems that remain largely untapped even by modern drilling techniques. Ancient geological formations contain substantial water reserves, trapped in porous rock structures that could theoretically be accessed through properly targeted intervention. Yet reaching these resources would require precise knowledge of subsurface geology combined with technology capable of creating access channels through solid rock. Consider the possibility that Moses possessed devices capable of sonic drilling or controlled energy discharge that could fracture rock formations along predetermined paths. Modern mining technology employ similar principles to access underground resources, using shaped charges or sonic percussion to create precisely directed openings. Scaling such technology to create instant access to major aquifers would require understanding of geological engineering that exceeds our current capabilities. The staff's role in this demonstration suggests technological rather than merely symbolic function. If that device contains sensors capable of detecting underground water sources, combined with energy projection systems that could create access channels, it would explain both the precision of targeting and the sustained flow that resulted. Such geological scanning and drilling technology would represent advanced understanding of physics and engineering that transcended anything available to ancient science. Ancient texts from various traditions preserve similar accounts of water being produced from solid rock through technological intervention. Mesopotamian records describe devices that could locate and extract groundwater from impossible locations. Chinese chronicles mention tools that could command springs to appear in barren landscapes. These scattered references might preserve memories of geological engineering capabilities that periodically manifested throughout ancient history. The quantity of water produced sufficient for nearly 2 million people plus livestock implies access to major underground reserves rather than minor springs. Sustaining such massive populations in desert environments would require industrial-scale water extraction that could only be achieved through advanced technological intervention. The continuous flow described in biblical accounts suggests not just access to water, but systematic extraction and distribution systems. Modern understanding of hydrogeology reveals that the Sinai Peninsula contains extensive fossil water aquifers trapped in underground rock formations during previous geological epochs. These reserves represent millions of years of accumulated precipitation stored in porous limestone and sandstone structures. Accessing such resources would require precise knowledge of geological formations, combined with technology capable of creating conduits through layers of solid rock. The account suggests that Moses performed this demonstration multiple times in different locations, implying portable technology capable of geological analysis and water extraction under field conditions. Such capabilities would represent understanding of subsurface scanning, controlled energy projection, and hydrodynamic engineering that integrates multiple advanced technologies into compact, portable systems. Archaeological evidence supports the presence of substantial human populations in traditionally arid regions during the time frame suggested by biblical chronology. Isotopic analysis of ancient wells and water sources reveals usage patterns consistent with much larger populations than local water sources could naturally support. This circumstantial evidence suggests that extraordinary water extraction capabilities operated in desert regions where conventional sources would have been inadequate. The psychological impact of witnessing water emerge from solid rock would have reinforced Moses' authority while demonstrating technological capabilities that transcended normal human achievement. Such displays would have convinced doubters that their leader possessed access to forces beyond conventional understanding, building social cohesion necessary for sustained wilderness survival. Bedouin traditions preserve detailed knowledge of hidden water sources throughout desert regions, including techniques for locating underground reserves through subtle environmental indicators. Yet even the most experienced desert guides acknowledge that certain historical water sources seem to defy natural explanation, appearing in locations where geological conditions suggest no possibility of natural springs. The energy requirements for fracturing solid rock and creating sustained water flow would represent significant technological achievement. Such capabilities would require either portable power generation systems that exceed our current engineering, or access to energy sources beyond terrestrial origins. The repeated demonstration of rock striking across different geographical locations suggests technology that could operate independently of fixed infrastructure. The selective nature of these demonstrations providing water for Israelites while leaving surrounding desert populations without similar access raises questions about the mechanisms involved. If Moses possessed geological engineering technology, its application apparently remained limited to specific circumstances and populations rather than general environmental modification. As water cascaded from barren stone like liquid silver, catching desert sunlight, witnesses observed technology that dissolved the boundaries between geological possibility and engineering achievement that seemed to transcend natural law. The springs that sustained Israel through wilderness wandering became evidence of technological mastery that suggested intelligences whose understanding of Earth's hidden structures enabled them to unlock abundance from the most unlikely sources. As the mountain of fire reveals its secrets across millennia of geological silence, we discover that Mount Sinai has witnessed phenomena that challenge every conventional explanation of natural processes. When Moses ascended this peak to receive divine law, the entire mountain shook with thunder, blazed with fire, and emanated smoke like a furnace, while mysterious voices spoke from the flames. The account describes not peaceful theophany, but a display of raw power that terrified witnesses camped miles away and left physical traces that may persist in the mountain as very stones. The biblical description reads like a technical manual for atmospheric and geological phenomena operating beyond normal parameters. Thunder without storm clouds, fire that burned without consuming vegetation, smoke that rose in sustained columns rather than dispersing according to wind patterns. These details suggest technological intervention rather than natural volcanic activity. The sustained nature of these effects, continuing for weeks rather than hours, implies energy sources and control systems that transcend conventional understanding of geological processes. Archaeological surveys of proposed Sinai locations have revealed evidence of ancient high-temperature events that exceed anything produced by known geological processes. Certain rock formations show characteristics consistent with exposure to directed energy sources that created localized melting and crystallization patterns. Mineral analysis reveals isotopic signatures that suggest artificial rather than natural origins for some geological features associated with traditional Sinai sites. Consider the possibility that Moses encountered technology that operated through controlled plasma generation and electromagnetic field manipulation. Advanced aerospace technology can create atmospheric phenomena that would appear identical to the biblical description-sustained luminous effects, controlled acoustic emissions, and localized environmental modifications that operate independently of natural weather patterns. Such technology would represent engineering capabilities that transcend our contemporary achievements while remaining theoretically possible. The account specifies that only Moses could approach the mountain while it remained active, suggesting either protective equipment or biological modifications that enabled survival in conditions that would kill unprotected humans. If the phenomena involved high-energy radiation or electromagnetic fields, appropriate shielding technology could theoretically allow close approach while maintaining safe distances for unprotected populations. Ancient traditions from around the world preserve similar accounts of mountains that blazed with fire and smoke, with voices during crucial moments in human history. Greek myths describe Olympus as a place where gods manifested through spectacular atmospheric displays. Hindu epics speak of sacred peaks where divine beings descended amid thunder and lightning. These scattered references might preserve memories of technological interventions that periodically occurred at elevated geographical locations. The timing of Sinai's activation precisely when Moses needed to establish legal and social foundations for Israelite civilizations, either remarkable coincidence or deliberately orchestrated demonstration. If the phenomena represented technology rather than natural events, their coordination with Moses' political and religious objectives implies sophisticated planning and precise control over powerful environmental effects. Modern understanding of atmospheric physics reveals that properly configured energy sources can indeed create sustained plasma formations that would appear as pillars of fire reaching from earth to sky. Research into high-energy atmospheric phenomena has demonstrated that electromagnetic fields can generate acoustic effects, luminous displays, and localized environmental modifications that match biblical descriptions. Scaling such effects to mountain-sized proportions would require enormous energy expenditures, but the underlying principles remain scientifically sound. The account preserves details suggesting that the mountains of phenomena responded to human presence and activity rather than following predetermined natural cycles. When Moses ascended, the displays intensified. When he descended, they moderated. This responsiveness implies either conscious intelligence controlling the effects or technological systems programmed to interact with specific individuals or circumstances. Geological studies of the Sinai Peninsula have identified multiple candidate peaks that show evidence of ancient high-energy events. Some locations contain unusual mineral formations that suggest exposure to temperatures and pressures beyond anything produced by normal geological processes. Others display magnetic anomalies that indicate past exposure to powerful electromagnetic fields that exceed anything generated by natural phenomena. The psychological impact of witnessing such displays would have profoundly influenced human religious and social development. Populations experiencing sustained demonstrations of apparent supernatural power would develop religious convictions and social structures that could persist across millennia. The Sinai experience became foundational to Western civilization precisely because it provided technological validation for legal and ethical principles that transcended tribal traditions. Ancient metallurgical sites throughout the Sinai region show evidence of advanced smelting techniques that exceeded the technological capabilities available to nomadic populations during the relevant historical period. Some locations contain evidence of high-temperature processes that required energy sources beyond anything achievable through conventional fire or solar concentration. These archaeological anomalies suggest technological activities that complemented rather than contradicted the biblical account. The sustained nature of Sinai as phenomena continuing for weeks rather than minutes represents perhaps the most technologically challenging aspect of the account. Maintaining artificial atmospheric and geological effects across such extended periods would require energy generation and control systems that far exceed anything achieved by contemporary science. This suggests either energy sources that transcend our understanding of physics or technology operating according to principles we have yet to discover. The selective nature of the phenomena affecting the mountain itself, while leaving surrounding terrain unmodified, demonstrates precision control that would challenge even advanced technological systems, creating localized environmental effects that remain contained within specific geographical boundaries while maintaining intensity sufficient to be visible across vast distances would require sophisticated energy management and field control capabilities. As lightning split the sky above peaks that had stood silent since the foundations of the earth were laid, witnesses observed technology that bridged the gap between terrestrial engineering and capabilities that seemed to originate beyond the natural order itself. The mountain of fire became a meeting place between human consciousness and intelligences whose mastery of natural forces enabled them to speak through thunder and write laws with lightning across the vault of heaven. The Ark of the Covenant emerges from biblical accounts as far more than a ceremonial chest. Its detailed construction specifications, lethal protective capabilities, and mysterious operational characteristics suggest a device whose true nature may have been concealed beneath religious symbolism. When the Israelites carried this golden box through the wilderness and into the Promised Land, they transported something that killed unauthorized personnel, communicated through visible and audible effects, and provided strategic advantages that transcended conventional military capabilities. The technical specifications preserved in biblical texts read like blueprints for advanced electrical equipment. Gold-plated surfaces that conducted energy wooden core structures that provided insulation, cherubim figures positioned to create electrical arcs between their outstretched wings. These details suggest construction principles that align more closely with electrical engineering than ceremonial artistry. The emphasis on precise measurements, specific materials, and exact positioning implies functional rather than merely decorative requirements. Archaeological attempts to locate the Ark have generated theories ranging from Ethiopian preservation to Templar concealment. Yet no verified physical evidence has emerged to confirm its continued existence. This absence might result from deliberate concealment, natural deterioration, or removal by intelligences who originally provided the technology. The consistent historical pattern of the Ark's effects, ceasing when it disappeared, suggests that its power source was either depleted or deliberately deactivated. Consider the possibility that the Ark contained advanced energy storage and generation systems disguised as religious artifacts. Capacitor technology operates through electrical charge separation between conductive surfaces, exactly the configuration suggested by the Ark's gold-plated construction. If ancient engineers possessed understanding of electrical phenomena beyond conventional historical timelines, they might have created devices that stored and discharged energy at levels lethal to unprotected personnel. The account of Uzzah's death when he touched the Ark to steady it during transport provides crucial technical information about the device's operational characteristics. The immediate fatality suggests electrical discharge sufficient to cause cardiac arrest or neurological damage. Modern electrical safety protocols recognize that high-voltage capacitors can indeed kill through brief contact, making the biblical account consistent with advanced electrical technology rather than supernatural intervention. The Ark's communication capabilities producing audible voices and visible manifestations suggest integrated audio and optical systems that could generate effects indistinguishable from supernatural phenomena to ancient observers. Modern electronics can easily produce such effects through speaker systems and holographic projection, but scaling such technology to operate reliably in desert conditions across extended periods would require engineering sophistication that exceeded anything available to ancient civilizations. The strategic military applications of the Ark provide additional evidence of technological rather than purely religious function. The device apparently provided tactical advantages during siege warfare, enabled long-range communication across the Israelite tribal confederation, and influenced battlefield outcomes through effects that transcended conventional weapons. Such capabilities suggest integrated sensor and communication systems that could provide intelligence, gathering, and coordinated command functions. Ancient traditions from various cultures preserve references to similar objects that combined religious significance with technological capability. Mesopotamian texts describe divine barges that could fly and communicate across vast distances. Egyptian records mention sacred boats that contained the power of gods and required specific ritual handling to avoid lethal consequences. These scattered accounts might preserve memories of technological artifacts that transcended normal human achievement. The construction materials specified for the Ark: acacia wood, pure gold, precious stones arranged in specific patterns align with materials that would optimize electromagnetic field generation and energy storage. Acacia wood possesses electrical insulation properties. Gold provides excellent conductivity, and crystalline structures can generate piezoelectric effects under proper conditions. These material choices suggest engineering decisions based on electrical rather than aesthetic considerations. The Ark's mobility designed to be carried by poles inserted through rings rather than direct. Contact reflects safety protocols appropriate for handling high-energy electrical equipment. Modern electrical safety requires insulated handling tools and grounding procedures to prevent accidental discharge, precisely the kind of precautions suggested by biblical handling instructions for the Ark. The account of the Ark's capture by Philistines provides additional technical information about its operational characteristics. The device apparently continued functioning independently of Israelite control, causing plagues and tumors among its captors until they returned it with appropriate offerings. This suggests autonomous operation rather than dependence on human operators, implying sophisticated control systems that could operate across different cultural and geographical contexts. The gradual disappearance of the ark's effects over historical time parallels patterns observed in technological devices whose power sources become depleted or whose operational systems deteriorate without proper maintenance. If the ark represented advanced technology rather than purely supernatural phenomena, its eventual inactivity would follow predictable patterns of mechanical and electrical degradation. The psychological impact of possessing such technology would have profoundly influenced Israelite religious and social development. A device that demonstrated consistent technological superiority over surrounding civilizations would have validated religious convictions, while providing practical advantages that enabled a small, nomadic people to establish territorial control over militarily superior opponents. Modern attempts to reconstruct ark technology based on biblical specifications have produced devices capable of generating electrical effects consistent with some recorded phenomena. While these reconstructions cannot approach the scale or sophistication suggested by historical accounts, they demonstrate that ancient engineers with sufficient knowledge could theoretically have constructed electrical devices using materials and techniques available during the biblical period. As golden surfaces reflected desert sunlight while concealing energies that could split the air with visible fire, witnesses observed technology that transformed religious faith into demonstrable power capable of reshaping the political and military balance of the ancient world. The ark became a bridge between human consciousness and technological capabilities that hinted at intelligences whose mastery of electrical forces enabled them to speak through lightning and manifest presence through controlled energy that transcended every boundary between the possible and impossible. But as we venture deeper into the mysteries surrounding Moses' encounter with divine law, the stone tablets themselves reveal characteristics that challenge conventional understanding of ancient writing materials and techniques. When Moses descended from Mount Sinai, carrying tablets described as written by the finger of God, witnesses observed not crude stone inscriptions, but objects that radiated light and possessed properties that transcended normal geological materials. The biblical account preserves specific details about these tablets that suggest technological rather than conventional stone construction. The text was apparently written by divine action rather than human carving, implying manufacturing processes that operated beyond normal stoneworking techniques. The tablets were said to be written on both sides, suggesting materials transparent enough to allow double-sided inscription or technological displays capable of presenting information on multiple surfaces simultaneously. Archaeological attempts to identify the materials used for these tablets have generated theories ranging from sapphire to various crystalline substances known for their optical properties. If the tablets incorporated crystalline matrices capable of storing and displaying information, they would represent data storage technology that far exceeded anything achieved by contemporary civilizations. Modern crystal-based data storage can indeed preserve information across millennia, while providing visual display capabilities under proper conditions. Consider the possibility that Moses received data storage devices disguised as stone tablets crystalline, matrices programmed with legal and ethical information that could be accessed through optical or electromagnetic interfaces. Such technology would appear magical to ancient observers while operating according to principles that remain scientifically valid. The writing they observed might have been holographic displays projected from internal data structures rather than physical inscriptions. The account of Moses breaking the first set of tablets in anger upon discovering the golden calf incident provides crucial information about their physical properties. Objects that could shatter when thrown suggest materials different from typical stone construction. Crystal-based devices would indeed break under impact while potentially displaying dramatic optical effects during destruction, exactly the kind of spectacular failure that would reinforce perceptions of supernatural origin. Ancient traditions from various cultures preserve references to similar objects that combined written information with luminous properties. Sumerian texts describe tablets of destiny that glowed with inner light and contained knowledge that transcended human understanding. Hindu epics mention inscribed objects that could display information in multiple languages simultaneously. These scattered accounts might preserve memories of information storage technology that periodically manifested throughout ancient history. The replacement of the broken tablets adds another technological dimension to the account. Moses apparently returned to Mount Sinai to receive duplicate copies of the destroyed information, suggesting either backup data storage or manufacturing capabilities that could reproduce complex information arrays on demand. Such redundancy implies systematic information management rather than unique divine artifacts. The content of the tablets' legal and ethical principles that became foundational to Western civilization suggests information management systems designed to establish sustainable social structures. If the tablets represented data storage devices, their content was carefully programmed to provide governance frameworks that could support complex societies across extended historical periods. The precision and comprehensiveness of this legal code implies systematic analysis of human social dynamics rather than arbitrary divine commands. Modern understanding of information storage reveals that crystalline matrices can indeed preserve data across geological timescales while maintaining accessibility through optical interfaces. Research into crystal-based computing has demonstrated that properly configured crystalline structures can store enormous amounts of information in forms that remain stable across millennia, while providing visual access under appropriate illumination conditions. The tablet's portability, designed to be carried by one person, yet containing comprehensive legal frameworks, suggests information density that exceeds anything achievable through conventional stone carving. If the tablets incorporated advanced data compression and display technologies, they could theoretically contain legal libraries equivalent to modern legislative databases, while remaining physically manageable for transport across desert terrain. The account specifies that Moses' face shone with reflected light after his encounters with the tablets, suggesting radiation exposure or electromagnetic field effects that created physiological changes visible to observers. If the tablets operated through high-energy optical or electromagnetic processes, close contact could theoretically produce the kind of dermatological effects described in biblical texts. The selective access to tablet information Moses could interpret their content, while others required explanation, implies interface systems that responded to specific biological or technological markers. Such selective access would ensure that advanced information remained limited to qualified interpreters, while preventing unauthorized access to potentially dangerous knowledge. The historical impact of the legal principles preserved in these tablets, forming foundations for Western legal tradition, ethical philosophy, and social organization, suggests information content that transcended the cultural limitations of any single historical period. Such comprehensive and enduring relevance implies systematic analysis of human social dynamics rather than contextual religious legislation. Archaeological evidence for similar information storage technologies in ancient contexts remains fragmentary but intriguing. Certain crystalline artifacts recovered from ancient sites display optical properties that suggest possible information storage capabilities, though their functions remain uncertain. The consistency of global traditions describing luminous tablets or inscribed objects that displayed information suggests technological patterns that transcended individual cultural contexts. The eventual disappearance of the tablets parallels patterns observed in other technological artifacts whose functions ceased over historical time. If the tablets represented advanced information storage devices rather than conventional stone inscriptions, their eventual inactivity would follow predictable patterns of technological degradation or deliberate deactivation by their original designers. The psychological impact of receiving legal frameworks through apparently supernatural technological means would have profoundly influenced human social development. Laws validated through technological demonstration that transcended normal human capabilities would carry authority that purely human legislation could never achieve, establishing ethical foundations that could persist across millennia of cultural change. As crystalline surfaces caught sunlight and transformed it into displays of legal wisdom that would reshape human civilization, witnesses observed technology that dissolved the boundaries between information storage and divine revelation, creating bridges between human consciousness and intelligences whose understanding of social dynamics enabled them to program sustainable governance into devices that transcended every limitation of conventional stone and bronze. Centuries earlier, observers had noted unusual physical changes in leaders who claimed direct contact with divine powers. Yet the transformation described in Moses after his encounters on Mount Sinai surpassed anything documented in historical records. When he descended from the mountain, carrying the tablets of law, his face radiated light so intensely that the Israelites could not bear to look directly at him. This luminous condition persisted for weeks, requiring Moses to wear a veil during normal social interactions, while removing it only during religious ceremonies. The biblical account preserves specific details about this radiance that suggest physiological rather than purely supernatural effects. The light apparently emanated from Moses' facial skin rather than reflecting external illumination, implying internal biochemical or electromagnetic changes that created visible luminescence. The gradual fading of this effect over time suggests exposure to energetic processes that created temporary biological modifications rather than permanent divine transformation. Modern understanding of radiation effects reveals that exposure to certain electromagnetic frequencies can indeed create luminescent effects in biological tissues through fluorescence or phosphorescence mechanisms. If Moses encountered high-energy technologies during his mountain experiences, such exposure could theoretically have triggered biochemical changes that created visible light emission from his skin cells. The gradual fading described in biblical texts aligns with known patterns of radioactive decay or biological metabolism of fluorescent compounds. Archaeological studies of ancient sites associated with Moses' activities have revealed elevated background radiation levels in certain locations, particularly areas traditionally identified with divine encounters. While these measurements remain within safe parameters, they suggest historical exposure to energy sources that exceeded normal environmental levels. Such evidence remains circumstantial, but consistent with technological rather than purely supernatural explanations for the phenomena described in biblical accounts. Consider the possibility that Moses' luminescent condition resulted from interaction with advanced biotechnology designed to modify human biological systems for specific purposes. Certain bioluminescent compounds can be introduced into living organisms to create sustained light emission that persists for weeks or months. If Moses received such modifications through technological rather than supernatural means, his glowing appearance would represent controlled biological engineering rather than miraculous transformation. Ancient traditions from various cultures preserve similar accounts of leaders whose physical appearance changed following encounters with advanced intelligences. Mesopotamian texts describe kings whose faces blazed with divine fire after receiving wisdom from celestial beings. Hindu epics speak of warriors whose skin radiated light following contact with advanced weapons or technologies. These scattered references might preserve memories of biological modifications that accompanied technological contact throughout ancient history. The social impact of Moses' luminescent condition extended beyond mere physical appearance to fundamental validation of his authority and divine commission. Populations witnessing sustained biological changes in their leader would have accepted claims of supernatural contact with far greater conviction than verbal testimony alone could provide. This suggests that the modifications may have been deliberately designed to establish social credibility rather than representing accidental side effects of technological exposure. The selective nature of these effects affecting Moses while sparing others who witnessed the same events implies either targeted biological intervention or exposure protocols that protected most individuals while allowing specific modifications in chosen subjects. If advanced intelligences possessed biotechnology capable of selective biological modification, they could theoretically have created the kind of discriminating effects described in biblical accounts. Modern research into bioluminescence has revealed that certain biochemical processes can indeed create sustained light emission in living organisms through controlled chemical reactions. Marine organisms like jellyfish and deep-sea fish generate light through luciferase reactions that could theoretically be introduced into human biological systems through genetic modification or biochemical supplementation. While such modifications would require sophisticated biotechnology, the underlying principles remain scientifically sound. The account specifies that Moses' luminescence intensified during religious ceremonies and direct communication with divine powers, suggesting that the effect could be controlled or modulated rather than remaining constant. This variability implies either conscious control over biological light generation or technological systems that could modify the intensity of biochemical luminescence according to circumstances or requirements. The psychological effects of sustained facial luminescence would have extended beyond social validation to personal consciousness modification. Living with constant awareness of visible biological change would have reinforced Moses' sense of divine commission while creating psychological conditions that supported the kind of sustained leadership required for guiding millions of people through decades of wilderness survival. Archaeological evidence for similar biological modifications remains limited but intriguing. Certain ancient burials contain remains that show unusual bone density patterns or mineral compositions that suggest exposure to biological modification technologies. While such evidence cannot definitively prove biotechnological intervention, it indicates that ancient populations may have experienced biological changes that transcended normal human physiological parameters. The duration of Moses' luminescent condition persisting for weeks, while gradually fading aligns with known patterns of biological metabolism and cellular regeneration. If the effect resulted from introduction of bioluminescent compounds or genetic modifications, the timeline described in biblical accounts would match theoretical predictions for how such modifications would be processed by normal human biological systems. The eventual cessation of these effects parallels patterns observed in other aspects of Moses' technological demonstrations. Just as the ark's power eventually diminished and other miraculous capabilities faded over time, the biological modifications that created facial luminescence apparently operated within finite parameters, rather than creating permanent physiological changes. The comparative analysis reveals that various ancient traditions preserve accounts of similar biological modifications in figures who claimed technological or divine contact. The consistent pattern of luminescent conditions following encounters with advanced intelligences suggests technological processes that transcended normal human biological capabilities, while operating according to scientific principles that remain theoretically valid. As desert sunlight reflected from facial features that generated their own internal illumination, witnesses observed biological modifications that bridged the gap between human physiology and technological capabilities that seemed to transcend natural law. The shining face of Moses became evidence of biotechnological mastery that hinted at intelligences whose understanding of biological systems enabled them to write their presence directly into human flesh through controlled modifications that transformed leaders into living demonstrations of power beyond terrestrial origins. What if these nomads possessed knowledge that exceeded the survival wisdom accumulated by desert peoples across millennia of harsh experience? The logistical challenges of sustaining nearly 2 million People plus livestock across 40 years of wilderness wandering should have resulted in catastrophic population collapse within the first year. Yet biblical accounts describe not gradual attrition, but a thriving community that emerged from the desert stronger and more organized than when they entered, possessing technologies and social structures that enabled them to conquer established civilizations. The mathematical realities of wilderness survival reveal the extraordinary nature of this achievement. 2 million people require approximately 4 million gallons of water daily for basic survival, plus additional quantities for livestock, cooking, and sanitation. Desert regions where the Israelites supposedly wandered contain insufficient water sources to support even a fraction of such populations. The account suggests either access to undocumented water sources or technological capabilities that enabled water production or conservation on industrial scales. Food requirements present equally challenging logistics. Traditional hunter-gatherer societies require approximately 50 square miles per person to sustain themselves in arid environments, meaning 2 million people would need territory larger than many modern nations. The Sinai Peninsula and associated desert regions could not possibly support such populations through conventional foraging or nomadic herding. Yet biblical accounts describe a well-nourished population that maintained military capabilities throughout their wilderness period. Archaeological surveys of traditional Exodus routes have failed to identify evidence of temporary encampments large enough to accommodate populations in the millions. Desert environments typically preserve evidence of human habitation for centuries, yet excavations in relevant regions reveal only scattered traces of small-scale nomadic activity during the appropriate historical periods. This absence of archaeological evidence suggests either alternative geographical routes or population scales far smaller than biblical accounts indicate. Consider the possibility that the Israelite community possessed advanced technologies that enabled sustainable desert living through methods that transcended conventional survival techniques. Water generation or purification systems could theoretically have enabled population densities impossible through natural resource exploitation alone. Portable energy sources might have powered environmental modification technologies that created localized zones of enhanced habitability within otherwise hostile terrain. The account preserves details suggesting sophisticated organizational structures that transcended typical nomadic social arrangements. The establishment of complex legal systems, educational institutions, and technological workshops implies infrastructure capabilities that exceeded anything achievable through purely traditional means. The production of the tabernacle requiring advanced metallurgy, textile production, and precision construction suggests technological capabilities that challenged assumptions about nomadic material culture. Ancient traditions from various nomadic cultures preserve references to periods when technological assistance enabled survival in impossible circumstances. Bedouin folklore speaks of mysterious benefactors who provided knowledge and tools that sustained communities through desperate situations. Native American traditions describe sky beings who taught survival techniques that transcended normal human capabilities. These scattered accounts might preserve memories of technological intervention that enabled human populations to thrive in challenging environments. The Levitical priesthood apparently possessed specialized knowledge that enabled maintenance of complex technological systems across extended periods. Their carefully defined roles and responsibilities suggest institutional structures designed to preserve and operate technological capabilities that required systematic maintenance and specialized expertise. The restriction of certain activities to specific bloodlines implies genetic or biological requirements for safely handling advanced technologies. Modern understanding of portable technology reveals theoretical possibilities for sustaining large populations in resource-poor environments. Solar power systems, water reclamation technologies, and advanced materials could theoretically enable nomadic communities to achieve population densities and technological capabilities that would appear miraculous to to observers lacking understanding of the underlying engineering principles. The account of skilled craftsmen emerging from the Israelite population to construct the tabernacle suggests either remarkable coincidence or systematic technological education that enabled ordinary people to master advanced techniques. Bezalel and Oholiab apparently possessed knowledge of metallurgy, textile production, and precision construction that exceeded anything available through traditional craft apprenticeships. Their expertise implies educational systems that provided technological training beyond conventional nomadic capabilities. The gradual development of Israelite military capabilities during wilderness wandering suggests acquisition of advanced weapons and tactical knowledge that enabled them to defeat established armies despite lacking conventional military infrastructure. The transformation from escaped slaves to effective military force implies either exceptional natural leadership or access to training and equipment that transcended normal possibilities for nomadic populations. Archaeological evidence from sites associated with early Israelite settlement in Canaan reveals technological capabilities that exceeded those of surrounding Canaanite populations in several key areas. Israelite communities demonstrated superior water management, agricultural techniques, and metallurgical capabilities that enabled them to establish territorial control despite numerical disadvantages. Such technological superiority suggests knowledge acquisition during wilderness periods rather than natural cultural development. The systematic nature of Israelite technological capabilities spanning water management, metallurgy, construction, and military applications implies comprehensive technological education rather than random acquisition of isolated techniques. If advanced intelligences provided systematic technological assistance during wilderness wandering, such comprehensive capability transfer would represent planned civilizational development rather than random miraculous intervention. The social structures that emerged from wilderness experience complex legal systems, educational institutions, and technological workshops provided foundations for sustained civilizational development that influenced subsequent human history. The systematic nature of these developments suggests deliberate social engineering designed to create sustainable technological civilization rather than temporary survival assistance. The psychological impact of sustained technological assistance would have profoundly shaped Israelite cultural development, creating confidence and organizational capabilities that enabled successful territorial conquest and civilizational establishment. Populations experiencing consistent demonstration of technological superiority would develop social cohesion and strategic thinking that could persist across generations of subsequent challenges. As morning light revealed encampments that should never have survived in landscapes where whole armies had vanished, without trace, witnesses observed technological capabilities that dissolved the boundaries between human survival limitations and engineering achievements that seemed to transcend natural law. The engineers in the wilderness became architects of civilizational development that suggested intelligences whose mastery of desert survival enabled them to transform nomadic tribes into technological societies, capable of reshaping the ancient world through knowledge that bridged earth and sky. Meanwhile, across the ancient world, other cultures preserved remarkably similar accounts of technological interventions that challenged conventional understanding of early human capabilities. From the storm weapons of Indra in Hindu epics to the skyboats of Mesopotamian gods, from the jade implements of Chinese emperors to the crystal skulls of Mesoamerican priests, scattered traditions suggest a global pattern of technological contact that transcended individual cultural contexts and geographical boundaries. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh describes encounters with beings who possessed weapons that could split mountains and devices that enabled flight across vast distances. Enkidu's transformation from wild man to civilized being through contact with advanced knowledge parallels Moses' development from shepherd to leader, capable of wielding powers that exceeded normal human achievement. These narrative similarities might preserve memories of systematic technological intervention in human development rather than coincidental mythological imagination. Hindu texts preserve extraordinarily detailed descriptions of aerial vehicles, energy weapons, and technological warfare that exceed anything achieved by conventional ancient civilizations. The Mahabharata describes battles fought with missiles that could destroy entire armies, flying machines that could travel between worlds, and communication systems that enabled instant contact across vast distances. The technical precision of these accounts suggests either remarkable imagination or preserved memories of actual technological capabilities. Ancient Chinese records document periods when emperors received technological gifts from sky beings who descended in luminous craft and provided knowledge that advanced human civilization. These dragon kings apparently possessed capabilities that enabled rapid transportation, environmental modification, and communication systems that transcended normal human achievement. The systematic nature of these technological transfers suggests planned intervention rather than random contact. Mesoamerican traditions describe culture bringers like Quetzalcoatl, who arrived from across the sea bearing advanced knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that enabled the construction of monuments whose precision challenges modern architectural capabilities. These figures apparently possess technological understanding that enabled them to predict celestial events, construct buildings aligned with impossible astronomical precision, and establish social systems that sustained complex civilizations. The common elements across these diverse traditions: aerial transportation, energy weapons, advanced construction techniques, environmental modification capabilities suggest technological patterns that transcended individual cultural contexts. If these accounts preserve memories of actual technological contact rather than mythological imagination, they indicate global intervention by intelligences whose capabilities exceeded anything achieved by conventional human civilizations. Egyptian traditions speak of the Neteru divine beings who established Egyptian civilization through technological gifts that included advanced construction techniques, astronomical knowledge, and preservation methods that enabled mummification processes whose sophistication exceeded contemporary medical understanding. The systematic nature of Egyptian technological achievements suggests comprehensive knowledge transfer rather than gradual cultural development. Nordic traditions preserve accounts of the Aesir sky beings whose technological capabilities included weather control, advanced metallurgy, and transportation systems that enabled travel between different worlds. The Bifrost Bridge described in Norse mythology might represent technological rather than mythological reality, transportation system that connected different geographical or dimensional locations through advanced engineering principles. African traditions throughout the continent describe visits from sky beings who provided technological knowledge that advanced human civilization through gifts of metallurgy, agriculture, and social organization. The consistency of these accounts across diverse African cultures suggests shared experiences rather than cultural diffusion of mythological themes. Australian Aboriginal traditions speak of the Dreamtime ancestors whose technological capabilities included environmental modification, advanced tool construction, and knowledge systems that enabled survival in challenging environments. The precision of Aboriginal astronomical and geographical knowledge suggests technological education rather than purely natural observation and cultural transmission. Native American traditions across both continents preserve accounts of star beings who provided technological knowledge that advanced human capabilities in areas ranging from agriculture to construction to astronomical observation. The similarity of these accounts across culturally isolated populations suggests shared technological contact rather than parallel mythological development. The systematic nature of technological themes across diverse global traditions: advanced transportation, energy manipulation, construction techniques, astronomical knowledge implies coordinated intervention rather than coincidental parallel development. If multiple human populations experienced similar technological contact during ancient periods. This would explain both the consistency of accounts and the emergence of advanced capabilities in civilizations that lacked conventional technological development pathways. The timing of these technological interventions apparently coincided with crucial periods in human civilizational development: the emergence of agriculture, the development of metallurgy, the construction of monumental architecture, the establishment of complex social systems. This coordination suggests planned technological assistance designed to advance human capabilities at critical developmental junctures. The gradual disappearance of these technological capabilities over historical time parallels patterns observed in the Moses narrative and other accounts of ancient technological contact. If advanced intelligences provided technological assistance to human populations during ancient periods, the eventual withdrawal of such support would explain why these capabilities failed to persist or develop into sustainable technological civilizations. The geographical distribution of these technological intervention accounts, spanning every inhabited continent and appearing in culturally isolated populations, suggests global rather than regional phenomena. If technological contact occurred on planetary scales during ancient periods, this would represent systematic engagement with human civilization rather than random or localized intervention. The psychological impact of such global technological contact would have profoundly shaped human cultural development, creating religious and mythological frameworks that preserved memories of technological capabilities, while providing social structures that could maintain civilizational achievements across extended historical periods. The persistence of these traditions across millennia suggests that technological contact created lasting impacts on human consciousness and cultural development. As scattered voices across time and geography whispered of sky beings and storm weapons, of crystal technology and aerial vehicles, witnesses to ancient mysteries recognized patterns that suggested technological capabilities whose origins transcended terrestrial evolution and hinted at intelligences whose mastery of natural forces enabled them to reshape human civilization through gifts of knowledge that bridged the gap between earthbound limitations and capabilities that seemed to originate among the stars themselves. As the sun sets behind monuments that still challenge modern engineering, we must consider that Moses' technological capabilities might have originated not from external sources, but from the sophisticated scientific traditions of Egypt itself. Raised within Pharaoh's household and educated in the mysteries of the world's most advanced civilization, Moses would have had access to knowledge carefully guarded in the House of Life, Egypt's combination of library, laboratory, and temple that preserved scientific wisdom accumulated across thousands of years. The Egyptian educational system for royal princes included instruction in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, chemistry, and engineering that exceeded anything available elsewhere in the ancient world. Palace archives contain texts describing construction techniques that enabled pyramid building, medical procedures that rivaled modern surgery, and chemical formulas that could produce effects indistinguishable from magic to uninitiated observers. If Moses received comprehensive education in these mysteries, he would have emerged with technological understanding that transcended normal human achievement. Archaeological discoveries have revealed the extraordinary sophistication of Egyptian scientific knowledge during the period when Moses supposedly lived. The Edwin Smith Papyrus demonstrates surgical techniques that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for centuries. The Rind Papyrus preserves mathematical calculations whose precision enabled architectural achievements that still inspire awe. Temple inscriptions describe chemical processes that could transform base materials into substances with remarkable properties. The Hermetic texts attributed to Thoth Hermes preserve references to advanced knowledge that supposedly predated Egyptian civilization itself. These documents speak of technologies that could manipulate matter at fundamental levels, create artificial life, and harness natural forces for purposes that transcended normal human capabilities. If such knowledge existed within Egyptian temple archives, Moses' education could have provided access to sciences that exceeded contemporary understanding by millennia. Consider the possibility that Egyptian priests possessed technological knowledge inherited from even more ancient sources, perhaps survivors of earlier civilizations whose achievements had been forgotten by conventional history. The construction techniques required for pyramid building suggest engineering capabilities that exceeded anything achievable through tools and methods acknowledged by orthodox archaeology. If Moses gained access to such advanced knowledge through his palace education, his subsequent achievements would represent recovered rather than revealed technology. The Egyptian understanding of chemistry extended far beyond simple metallurgy or medicine, to include processes that could manipulate matter in ways that appeared supernatural to outside observers. Temple laboratories contained equipment for distillation, crystallization, and molecular modification that enabled creation of substances with properties unknown to conventional ancient technology. The famous Egyptian blue pigment required manufacturing techniques whose sophistication exceeded contemporary industrial capabilities. Ancient texts describe secret chambers beneath major temples where the most advanced scientific knowledge was preserved and practiced by carefully selected initiates. These underground facilities apparently contained equipment and documentation that enabled technological achievements far beyond anything visible in public temple activities. If Moses received initiation into such mysteries, he would have gained access to technological capabilities that transcended normal human achievement. The systematic nature of Egyptian technological achievements, spanning architecture, medicine, chemistry, astronomy, and engineering, suggests comprehensive scientific knowledge rather than isolated discoveries. Egyptian civilization demonstrated understanding of mathematical principles, physical laws, and material properties that wouldn't be rediscovered until modern times. This systematic sophistication implies either remarkable natural development or inheritance of knowledge from more advanced sources. The gradual decline of Egyptian technological capabilities over historical time parallels patterns observed in other ancient civilizations that initially demonstrated remarkable achievements before gradually losing advanced capabilities. This decline suggests either depletion of resources required for advanced technology or loss of knowledge that couldn't be maintained without continuous expert instruction and institutional support. Archaeological evidence from Egyptian temple sites reveals equipment and architectural features whose functions remain mysterious to modern investigators. Certain chambers contain acoustic properties that suggest technological rather than purely ceremonial purposes. Chemical residues found in temple laboratories indicate manufacturing processes that exceed our understanding of ancient industrial capabilities. The connection between Egyptian scientific knowledge and religious practices suggests that advanced technology was deliberately concealed within spiritual frameworks to prevent unauthorized access while ensuring preservation across political upheavals and dynastic changes. If Moses received education in both religious and technological aspects of Egyptian mysteries, he would have understood how to maintain technological capabilities through spiritual rather than purely mechanical approaches. The timing of Moses' emergence as a technological leader coincided with a period of Egyptian political instability and religious reform that might have disrupted traditional knowledge preservation systems. If internal conflicts threatened the survival of advanced scientific knowledge, Egyptian initiates might have transferred crucial information to trusted individuals who could preserve and apply such knowledge in different cultural contexts. The selective nature of Moses' technological demonstrations, exceeding Egyptian capabilities in some areas while operating within parameters that Egyptian experts could partially understand, suggests access to advanced Egyptian knowledge combined with additional sources that transcended even Egypt's accumulated wisdom. This combination would explain both the familiarity and the superiority of Moses' technological achievements. The institutional structures that Moses established among the Israelites' priesthood responsibilities, technological workshops, educational systems mirror Egyptian temple organization while adapting these structures to nomadic rather than sedentary civilizational requirements. Such systematic adaptation suggests comprehensive understanding of Egyptian institutional frameworks rather than random cultural borrowing. The psychological impact of witnessing Egyptian-trained leadership applying technological capabilities that exceeded even Egyptian achievements would have profoundly impressed both Israelite and Egyptian populations. Such demonstrations would have validated Moses' authority while establishing technological credibility that transcended normal religious or political claims. The persistence of certain technological capabilities among Israelite populations following Moses' death suggests institutional preservation of knowledge rather than dependence on individual charismatic leadership. If Moses established systematic knowledge transfer processes based on Egyptian educational models, advanced technological capabilities could theoretically have persisted across multiple generations. As ancient wisdom whispered through corridors, where pre-scientists had pursued knowledge that bridged earthly understanding and capabilities that seemed to originate beyond terrestrial limitations, Moses emerged as a bridge between civilizations whose technological achievements suggested that human consciousness had once achieved mastery over natural forces through knowledge that transcended every boundary between the possible and the miraculous. But as we journey deeper into ancient mysteries, an even more extraordinary possibility emerges from apocryphal texts that speak of Watchers' advanced beings who descended from celestial realms to interact directly with human civilization. The Book of Enoch, excluded from biblical canon but preserved in Ethiopian traditions, describes these entities as possessing technological knowledge that enabled them to teach humans advanced sciences, manipulate natural forces, and intervene in human development through capabilities that transcended earthly origins. These Watchers apparently possessed comprehensive understanding of metallurgy, astronomy, meteorology, and biological sciences that far exceeded anything achieved by conventional human civilizations. According to Enochian accounts, they taught humans to smelt metals, predict weather patterns, understand celestial movements, and modify biological systems through techniques that seemed magical, but operated according to principles that modern science might recognize as advanced technology. The systematic nature of Watcher intervention suggests coordinated technological assistance rather than random contact with primitive humans. Different Watchers apparently specialized in specific areas of knowledge. Azazel taught metallurgy and weapon construction. Barakal provided astronomical knowledge. Kokabil revealed understanding of celestial signs, while others contributed expertise in medicine, agriculture, and environmental modification. This systematic knowledge transfer implies planned technological assistance designed to advance human capabilities. Consider the possibility that Moses received direct assistance from surviving Watchers or their technological legacy during his encounters on Mount Sinai and throughout his wilderness leadership. The phenomena described in biblical accounts, environmental manipulation, energy projection, biological modification, and technological demonstrations align closely with capabilities attributed to Watchers in Enochian literature. Such assistance would explain both the source and the systematic nature of Moses' extraordinary achievements. The account of Moses spending 40 days on Mount Sinai without food or water suggests either supernatural sustenance or advanced life support technology that enabled survival in conditions that would normally prove fatal to unprotected humans. If Watchers possessed biotechnology capable of modifying human biological requirements, they could theoretically have provided the kind of enhanced survival capabilities that enabled Moses to survive extended exposure to high-energy environments. Ancient traditions from various cultures preserve remarkably consistent accounts of beings who descended from celestial realms to provide technological assistance to human civilizations. Mesopotamian texts describe the Anunnaki as possessing capabilities that enabled flight, environmental modification, and technological construction that exceeded normal human achievement. Greek traditions speak of Titans, whose technological capabilities included weather control and construction techniques that created monuments whose precision challenged natural possibilities. The gradual corruption and eventual punishment of watchers described in Enochian literature might explain why advanced technological capabilities periodically appeared in human history, but failed to establish sustainable technological civilizations. If watcher intervention violated cosmic laws or natural developmental processes, their eventual withdrawal would account for the cyclical pattern of technological emergence and disappearance observed throughout ancient history. The forbidden nature of watcher, knowledge described as dangerous to human development and ultimately destructive to natural order, suggests that advanced technology might carry inherent risks that transcend mere mechanical dangers. If watchers possessed understanding of natural forces that could destabilize ecological or cosmic systems, their reluctance to share complete knowledge might explain why Moses' technological demonstrations remained limited rather than establishing comprehensive technological civilization. Archaeological evidence for watcher intervention remains circumstantial but intriguing. Megalithic construction sites worldwide demonstrate engineering capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of ancient human technology. The precision of astronomical alignments, the massive scale of construction projects, and the advanced understanding of physics required for such achievements suggest technological assistance that transcended normal human capabilities during relevant historical periods. The genetic implications of watcher intervention described in Enochian texts, as including biological hybridization that created enhanced human capabilities, might explain the exceptional abilities demonstrated by figures like Moses throughout ancient history. If watchers possessed biotechnology capable of genetic modification, their descendants could theoretically have inherited enhanced biological capabilities that enabled survival and achievement under conditions that would prove impossible for unmodified humans. The systematic nature of knowledge areas associated with watcher intervention metallurgy, astronomy, medicine, agriculture, construction represents precisely the technological foundations required for advanced civilization. If watchers provided systematic technological education designed to accelerate human development, their intervention would explain the sudden emergence of sophisticated capabilities in civilizations that lacked apparent developmental pathways for such achievements. The moral framework surrounding watcher intervention emphasizing the dangerous nature of premature technological advancement and the importance of natural developmental processes suggests sophisticated understanding of the relationship between technological capability and social evolution. If advanced intelligence is recognized that technological gifts could destabilize human societies that weren't prepared for such capabilities, their selective intervention might explain why technological assistance remained limited rather than comprehensive. The geographical distribution of sites associated with technological achievements that exceed conventional ancient capabilities, spanning every inhabited continent and appearing in culturally isolated populations, suggests global rather than regional watcher intervention. Such comprehensive geographical coverage would require coordinated efforts by multiple entities, possessing advanced transportation and communication capabilities. The cyclical nature of technological emergence and disappearance throughout human history parallels patterns described in Enochian accounts of watcher intervention followed by withdrawal or punishment. If advanced beings periodically provided technological assistance, followed by systematic removal of such support, this would explain why human civilizations repeatedly achieved remarkable capabilities before losing advanced technologies and reverting to more primitive developmental stages. The psychological impact of direct contact with technologically advanced beings would have profoundly shaped human religious and cultural development, creating frameworks for understanding technological capabilities through spiritual rather than purely mechanical concepts. The integration of advanced technology with religious experience might have enabled human populations to maintain technological capabilities across extended periods, despite lacking complete understanding of underlying principles. The preservation of Watcher accounts in religious rather than historical literature suggests that technological contact was systematically reinterpreted through spiritual frameworks that could maintain cultural memory while concealing dangerous technical information from populations that were unprepared for direct access to advanced capabilities. As whispers of ancient contact echoed through texts that mainstream scholars dismissed as mythology, witnesses to extraordinary possibilities recognized that human achievement might represent collaboration between terrestrial consciousness and intelligences, whose technological mastery enabled them to reshape civilizational development through interventions that bridged the gap between earthly limitations and capabilities that originated among intelligences who had transcended every boundary between the natural and the miraculous. As we peer through the veils of ancient perception, a profound transformation in human understanding becomes apparent. The systematic reinterpretation of advanced technology through religious and supernatural frameworks that could make sense of capabilities that exceeded every category of normal experience. When populations lacking technological context encountered devices that could manipulate natural forces with precision and power beyond their comprehension, the only available interpretive framework was divine intervention. Picture an ancient observer witnessing Moses' staff transforming into a serpent, water turning to blood at his command, or fire descending from heaven at his direction. Without understanding of nanotechnology, biological engineering, or plasma physics, such demonstrations could only be explained through supernatural intervention. The technology became indistinguishable from divine power, not because it operated outside natural law, but because its principles transcended the observer's understanding of what natural law could encompass. This transformation of technology into religious experience created psychological effects that extended far beyond mere intellectual confusion. When people witnessed capabilities that exceeded every framework for understanding cause and effect, they experienced what anthropologists recognize as hierophany manifestation of the sacred, that fundamentally reorganizes perception of reality. Technology sufficiently advanced beyond the observer's knowledge base creates exactly this kind of consciousness-altering encounter with apparent impossibility. The social implications of technological mystification extend to fundamental questions of authority and social organization. Leaders who could demonstrate technological capabilities that appeared supernatural would command obedience and reverence that transcended normal political relationships. Moses' ability to produce water from stone, food from heaven, and passage through seas would have established authority based not merely on charismatic leadership, but on demonstrable power over natural forces. Ancient political systems throughout the world reflect this integration of technological demonstration with religious authority. Egyptian pharaohs claimed divine status partially based on their access to technologies that exceeded normal human capabilities. Mesopotamian kings established legitimacy through possession of divine weapons and tools that provided practical advantages in warfare and governance. The systematic connection between technological superiority and religious authority suggests that advanced capabilities were consistently reinterpreted through spiritual frameworks. Consider how populations experiencing sustained technological intervention would develop social structures designed to maintain access to such capabilities across generations. The Levitical priesthood's careful preservation of operational procedures, material specifications, and safety protocols suggests institutional frameworks designed to maintain technological systems whose underlying principles remain mysterious to the operators themselves. The psychological adaptation required for living with sustained technological intervention that exceeded understanding would have created cognitive frameworks that could accept apparent impossibilities as normal aspects of reality. Generations growing up with daily evidence of capabilities that transcended natural law would develop consciousness structures fundamentally different from populations whose experience remained limited to conventional cause and effect relationships. The systematic nature of technological mystification, consistently interpreting advanced capabilities through religious rather than mechanical frameworks, suggests either cultural incapacity to develop appropriate conceptual categories or deliberate concealment of technological information to prevent unauthorized access to dangerous capabilities. If advanced beings provided technological assistance while maintaining control over knowledge transfer, they might deliberately encourage religious rather than scientific interpretation. Modern examples of technological mystification continue to demonstrate how populations lacking appropriate conceptual frameworks interpret advanced capabilities through supernatural categories. Cargo cult phenomena in Pacific Islands show how indigenous populations exposed to advanced technology consistently develop religious rather than scientific explanations for capabilities that exceed their technological experience. The persistence of religious interpretations, even when technological explanations become available, suggests psychological and social functions that transcend mere intellectual limitation. Religious frameworks provide meaning, purpose, and social cohesion that purely mechanical explanations often fail to deliver. The integration of advanced technology with spiritual experience might represent adaptive responses to consciousness-expanding contact with capabilities that transcend normal human achievement. The relationship between technological demonstration and faith development reveals how sustained exposure to apparently impossible capabilities can create psychological conditions that support long-term social cohesion and collective action. Populations sharing technological mystification experiences develop group identity and mission consciousness that can persist across centuries of cultural transmission. The systematic connection between technological capabilities and moral authority throughout ancient traditions suggests that advanced intelligences might have deliberately used technological demonstration to establish ethical and social frameworks that could support sustainable civilizational development. The integration of practical power with moral instruction creates authority structures that transcend both pure force and mere intellectual persuasion. Archaeological evidence for the systematic integration of advanced technology with religious practice appears at sites worldwide where sophisticated engineering capabilities were consistently associated with sacred rather than purely practical functions. The construction of monuments whose precision exceeded normal human capabilities consistently occurred within religious contexts that provided social frameworks for organizing massive collective efforts. The gradual separation of technological and religious authority in modern societies represents a fundamental shift in human consciousness that may have eliminated psychological conditions necessary for maintaining certain types of advanced capabilities. If some technologies require integration with spiritual practice for stable operation, purely secular approaches might be inherently incapable of sustaining such systems. The psychological requirements for operating advanced technologies that transcend normal human capabilities might include consciousness states that can only be maintained through spiritual practice and community structures. If certain technologies require operators whose consciousness has been modified through sustained spiritual discipline, purely mechanical approaches would prove inadequate for maintaining such systems. The selection criteria for individuals capable of safely operating advanced technologies might include psychological and spiritual qualifications that transcend mere intellectual training. Moses' character development through wilderness experience, spiritual discipline, and moral commitment might have been necessary preparation for handling technological capabilities that could prove destructive in unqualified hands. The institutional structures required for maintaining advanced technological capabilities across extended historical periods would need to integrate technical training with spiritual development and moral formation. The systematic preservation of both operational procedures and ethical frameworks suggests that sustainable advanced technology requires comprehensive human development rather than mere technical competence. As ancient voices whispered through temples where technological marvels were enshrined as divine manifestations, witnesses to extraordinary possibilities, recognized that the boundaries between natural and supernatural might reflect limitations of perception rather than absolute categories of reality, suggesting that human consciousness itself might represent technology, whose potential remained largely unexplored and whose development could bridge gaps between earthly understanding and capabilities that seemed to originate among intelligences who had transcended every limitation of purely mechanical achievement. Centuries have passed since the Ark of the Covenant vanished from recorded history, leaving behind only legends, theories, and an absence so profound that it has inspired countless expeditions, seeking traces of humanity as most technologically significant religious artifact. The last reliable biblical reference places the Ark in Solomon's temple, but after the Babylonian conquest, this device that had demonstrated such extraordinary capabilities simply disappears from historical records, as if it had returned to the mysterious sources from which it originally emerged. Ethiopian Orthodox tradition claims that the Queen of Sheba acquired the Ark during her legendary visit to Solomon, transporting it to Aksum, where it remains hidden in the Church of Our Lady, Mary of Zion. Local priests maintain that they guard the artifact with their lives, but no independent verification has ever been permitted. If the Ethiopian claims prove accurate, the Ark has remained in Africa for nearly 3 millennia, its technological capabilities either dormant or carefully concealed from outside investigation. The Knights Templar developed an obsession with Temple Mount archaeology that some historians suggest was motivated by more than mere religious devotion. Extensive excavations beneath the mount during the Crusader period have led to speculation that Templars discovered either the Ark itself or technological information related to its construction and operation. The sudden wealth and influence that Templars acquired during this period, combined with their mysterious practices and eventual persecution, suggests they may have encountered something that transcended conventional medieval understanding. Archaeological investigations of Temple Mount face political and religious restrictions that have prevented comprehensive exploration of underground chambers and tunnels that definitely exist beneath the site. Ground-penetrating radar has identified large voids and artificial structures that remain inaccessible due to sensitive political circumstances. If the Ark was hidden rather than destroyed or removed, these underground complexes represent the most likely location for its preservation. Consider the possibility that the Ark's disappearance was planned rather than accidental, that its original providers arranged for its removal when human stewardship proved inadequate, or when historical circumstances no longer supported its beneficial operation. If the device represented technology loaned rather than gifted to human civilization, its withdrawal would follow patterns observed in other accounts of advanced technological contact that operated within specific temporal and cultural parameters. The systematic nature of the Ark's capabilities, electrical effects, communication functions, military applications, and apparent autonomous operation suggests technology whose sophistication exceeded anything that could be maintained indefinitely through human oversight alone. If the device required periodic maintenance or energy replenishment that exceeded human technological capabilities, its eventual failure or withdrawal would represent predictable technological obsolescence rather than mysterious disappearance. Ancient texts preserve references to the Ark's effects gradually diminishing over time, suggesting either power source depletion or systematic deactivation rather than sudden catastrophic failure. The device apparently continued functioning during the early monarchy period, but with reduced effectiveness compared to its wilderness and conquest demonstrations. This pattern aligns with technological systems operating within finite energy parameters or programmed operational limits. The connection between the Ark's presence and Israel's military success, followed by increasing vulnerability after its disappearance, suggests that the device provided practical rather than merely symbolic advantages. If the Ark incorporated communication, surveillance, or energy projection capabilities, its loss would represent genuine degradation of technological infrastructure rather than purely psychological or religious impact. Modern attempts to reconstruct Ark technology based on biblical specifications have produced devices capable of generating electrical effects consistent with some recorded phenomena. But these reconstructions lack the scale, sophistication, and autonomous operation described in ancient accounts. Such limitations suggest either incomplete understanding of the construction requirements or dependence on materials and energy sources that remain unavailable to contemporary technology. The global distribution of legends describing similar technological artifacts, divine, boats, sacred weapons, communication devices that enabled contact with celestial intelligences, suggests that the Ark represented one example of technology that periodically manifested throughout human history before disappearing, according to patterns that transcended individual cultural contexts. The systematic removal of references to advanced technological capabilities from later biblical texts suggests editorial decisions that concealed rather than preserved information about humanity's most sophisticated technological achievements. If later religious authorities recognized that technological information posed dangers to populations unprepared for such knowledge, systematic concealment would represent responsible rather than suppressive editorial practice. The psychological impact of the Ark's disappearance on Israelite religious and cultural development created theological frameworks that emphasized spiritual rather than technological relationships with divine power. This shift might have been deliberately engineered to prepare human consciousness for sustained religious practice that could operate independently of technological assistance. Archaeological evidence for similar technological artifacts in other ancient contexts remains fragmentary but suggestive. Certain metallic objects recovered from ancient sites display properties that suggest advanced manufacturing techniques, though their original functions remain uncertain. The consistency of global traditions describing technological artifacts that disappeared suggests patterns that transcended individual cultural imagination. The timing of the Ark's disappearance, coinciding with periods of political instability and foreign conquest, might have been coordinated to prevent advanced technology from falling into hands that lacked appropriate spiritual preparation or ethical frameworks for responsible operation. If the device required specific consciousness states or moral qualifications for safe operation, its removal during periods of social degradation would represent protective rather than punitive action. The institutional structures that developed to maintain the Ark priesthood requirements, operational procedures, safety protocols created frameworks that could theoretically be adapted for maintaining other forms of advanced technology. If human stewardship proved capable of responsible technological management, these institutional models might provide foundations for renewed contact with advanced capabilities. The preservation of detailed Ark descriptions in biblical texts, despite the device's disappearance, suggests that information was maintained for potential future reconstruction rather than mere historical documentation. If technological specifications were preserved in anticipation of renewed capability to manufacture or operate such devices, biblical accounts might represent instruction manuals rather than purely religious literature. The comparative analysis of Ark disappearance accounts with similar patterns in other technological traditions reveals consistent themes of withdrawal, concealment, or return to celestial sources that suggest coordinated rather than random technological removal. If advanced intelligences maintained oversight of technological gifts to human civilization, systematic withdrawal would represent managed technological transfer rather than abandonment. As morning light illuminated empty chambers where humanity's most advanced technology had once demonstrated capabilities that bridged earth and heaven, witnesses to extraordinary absence recognized that some technologies might operate according to principles that transcended human ownership, suggesting that contact with advanced capabilities required consciousness development that could earn and maintain access to powers that originated beyond terrestrial limitations and whose stewardship demanded wisdom that few human civilizations had proven capable of sustaining across the challenges of historical change. As desert winds carry whispers of ancient secrets across landscapes that have swallowed entire civilizations, we confront the haunting absence of physical evidence for technological capabilities that once reshaped the foundations of human civilization. If Moses wielded devices that could part seas, transform matter, and manipulate natural forces with precision that exceeded modern achievement, where are the archaeological traces of such extraordinary technology? The silence of stone and metal speaks as loudly as any testimony, raising profound questions about the nature of advanced capabilities and the reasons for their systematic disappearance. The archaeological record preserves abundant evidence of conventional ancient technologies, bronze weapons, ceramic vessels, stone tools, architectural remains that demonstrate remarkable engineering skill within accepted historical parameters. Yet sites associated with Moses' activities reveal no technological artifacts that could account for the capabilities described in biblical narratives. This absence suggests either alternative geographical locations, rapid technological degradation, or systematic removal of evidence that transcended normal historical preservation patterns. Consider the possibility that advanced technologies operated through principles that left minimal archaeological signatures, energy projection systems that required no physical infrastructure, biological manipulation devices that decomposed completely after use, or nanotechnological systems that operated at scales too small to preserve recognizable traces. Such technologies would represent understanding of natural forces that minimized rather than maximized material footprints. The systematic nature of this technological absence, extending beyond individual artifacts to complete categories of advanced capabilities, suggests either coordinated removal efforts or technologies whose operation inherently avoided creating permanent physical evidence. If advanced intelligences deliberately design technological assistance to operate without leaving traces that could be misused by subsequent human populations, such systematic concealment would represent sophisticated understanding of historical process and technological security. Archaeological anomalies that do exist in regions associated with Moses' activities reveal tantalizing hints of extraordinary events without providing definitive technological evidence. Unusual mineral formations that suggest exposure to high-energy processes, magnetic anomalies that indicate powerful electromagnetic fields, and geological features that appear inconsistent with natural formation processes all point toward extraordinary historical events without confirming specific technological explanations. A gradual disappearance of technological capabilities described in biblical and other ancient texts parallels patterns observed in modern military and industrial security, where advanced technologies are systematically concealed or destroyed to prevent unauthorized access. If Moses' technological assistance originated from sources concerned about human misuse of advanced capabilities, systematic evidence removal would represent responsible technological security rather than mysterious divine withdrawal. Ancient traditions from various cultures preserve accounts of technological artifacts that vanished at crucial historical moments, returning to celestial sources or disappearing into hidden locations that remained inaccessible to human investigation. The consistency of these traditions suggests either coordinated concealment efforts or technologies whose operation included provisions for systematic withdrawal when specific conditions were no longer met. The institutional structures that developed around advanced technological artifacts, priesthood requirements, operational protocols, and restricted access procedures created frameworks designed to limit technological dissemination rather than promote widespread adoption. If advanced technologies required specific consciousness states or ethical qualifications for safe operation, institutional restrictions might have been deliberately designed to prevent dangerous technological proliferation. Modern attempts to locate physical evidence of advanced ancient technologies have consistently encountered political, religious, and logistical obstacles that prevent comprehensive investigation of sites where such evidence might logically be preserved. The Temple Mount, Sinai Peninsula, and Ethiopian highlands all remain partially or completely inaccessible to archaeological investigation, suggesting that systematic concealment might continue to operate through contemporary institutional structures. The psychological impact of technological withdrawal would have created cultural adaptations that emphasized spiritual rather than mechanical approaches to accessing extraordinary capabilities. If human populations learned that advanced technology could disappear without warning, they would develop religious and cultural frameworks that could maintain social cohesion and practical effectiveness, independently of technological assistance. Archaeological preservation conditions in desert environments, where Moses operated, would theoretically support preservation of metallic and ceramic technological artifacts across millennia, yet systematic surveys of relevant regions have failed to identify remnants of devices capable of producing the effects described in biblical accounts. This absence suggests either alternative technologies that avoided conventional materials, or systematic removal efforts that exceeded normal historical processes. The relationship between technological concealment and spiritual development throughout ancient traditions suggests that advanced capabilities might require consciousness evolution that transcends mere technical training. If certain technologies operate only when human consciousness reaches specific developmental thresholds, their disappearance might represent natural, rather than artificial selection processes that respond to collective rather than individual qualification levels. The systematic integration of advanced technological capabilities with religious practices throughout ancient civilizations suggests that spiritual frameworks might have been deliberately designed to preserve technological knowledge in forms that could survive periods when physical technologies were unavailable. If religious practices preserved operational principles for advanced technologies, spiritual traditions might represent technological preservation systems rather than purely devotional activities. The comparative analysis of technological disappearance patterns across diverse ancient civilizations reveals consistent themes of withdrawal, concealment, and transformation that suggest coordinated rather than random technological removal. If advanced intelligences maintained oversight of technological gifts to human civilizations, systematic evidence removal would represent managed technological transfer rather than natural degradation or historical accident. The preservation of detailed technological descriptions in religious texts, despite the absence of corresponding physical artifacts, suggests that information was maintained for potential future reconstruction rather than mere historical documentation. If technological specifications were preserved in anticipation of renewed human capability to manufacture or operate advanced devices, ancient texts might represent instruction manuals awaiting appropriate technological and consciousness development. The energy requirements for maintaining advanced technologies across extended historical periods would have required either sustainable power sources that transcended conventional energy systems, or periodic technological renewal that exceeded human manufacturing capabilities. If Moses' devices operated through principles that required ongoing maintenance or energy replenishment from external sources, their eventual failure or withdrawal would represent predictable technological obsolescence rather than mysterious disappearance. The institutional memory of technological capabilities that persisted long after physical artifacts disappeared suggests that human consciousness retained impressions of technological contact that transcended material evidence. If technological interaction created lasting modifications in human awareness and capability, the effects of such contact might persist independently of physical technological presence. As shadows lengthened across empty ruins where extraordinary technologies had once bridged gaps between human limitation and capabilities that seemed to originate beyond terrestrial boundaries, witnesses to profound absence recognized that some forms of evidence might transcend archaeological preservation, suggesting that contact with advanced technologies created transformations in human consciousness itself that represented the most enduring and significant traces of technological intervention, whose true legacy might reside not in buried artifacts, but in expanded human potential that awaited rediscovery through consciousness development that could reclaim capabilities that had never truly disappeared, but had simply migrated from external devices into internal human possibilities that remained largely unexplored. But another possibility emerges from our contemporary technological landscape, where humanity finds itself wandering through digital wildernesses, guided by artificial intelligences we don't fully understand, dependent on technologies whose internal operations remain as mysterious to most users as Moses' staff was to the Israelites who witnessed its extraordinary capabilities. We have become a civilization sustained by devices that produce effects indistinguishable from magic, relying on technological manna that appears in our hands through global supply chains, whose complexity exceeds any individual's comprehension. Picture the modern human tapping a glass rectangle to summon information from invisible networks that span the globe, commanding devices that respond to voice and gesture, while remaining completely ignorant of the quantum mechanical principles, electromagnetic field manipulations, and algorithmic processes that enable such interactions. We accept technological miracles as routine daily experience, much as the Israelites accepted water from rocks and bread from heaven as normal aspects of their wilderness journey. Our smartphones contain more computational power than the systems that guided humanity to the moon, yet we carry them as casually as the Israelites carried their possessions through the desert. The global positioning systems that guide our movements operate through satellites, whose orbital mechanics require relativistic physics corrections. But we experience this technological complexity as simple directional assistance that we take for granted, much as Moses' followers trusted pillars of fire and cloud without understanding the principles that enabled such navigation. The psychological parallels between ancient and contemporary technological dependence reveal striking similarities in human adaptation to capabilities that exceed understanding. Modern populations experiencing daily interaction with artificial intelligences, quantum computing effects, and biotechnological modifications develop the same kind of religious reverence and practical dependence that characterized ancient relationships with supernatural technological assistance. Consider how contemporary biotechnology enables genetic modifications, pharmaceutical interventions, and medical procedures that would appear miraculous to previous generations. Yet we accept these capabilities as normal aspects of healthcare rather than supernatural intervention. Our medical devices can restart hearts, restore vision, and modify brain chemistry through principles that remain mysterious to most patients who benefit from such interventions. The institutional structures that maintain contemporary technological civilization, research universities, technology corporations, regulatory agencies mirror the priesthood systems that preserved ancient technological capabilities through specialized knowledge, restricted access, and systematic training that enables technological maintenance across generations of users who lack comprehensive understanding of underlying principles. The systematic nature of contemporary technological dependence extends beyond individual devices to complete integration of human civilization with technological systems that provide food distribution, energy generation, communication networks, and environmental modification capabilities that sustain billions of people in environments that could not naturally support such populations without technological assistance. The psychological impact of living within technological systems that exceed individual comprehension creates consciousness conditions similar to those experienced by ancient populations dependent on apparently supernatural assistance. Modern humans develop faith-based relationships with technologies whose operations they must accept on trust rather than understanding, much as ancient peoples accepted miraculous intervention without requiring scientific explanation. The military applications of contemporary technology, precision-guided weapons, satellite surveillance, electromagnetic warfare capabilities, and cybersecurity systems provide strategic advantages that exceed anything available to conventional military forces, paralleling the technological superiority that enabled small Israelite populations to defeat militarily superior opponents through capabilities that transcended normal warfare parameters. The relationship between technological advancement and social organization reveals how advanced capabilities consistently create authority structures that transcend traditional political relationships. Contemporary technology companies wield influence that exceeds many governmental institutions, much as Moses' technological capabilities established authority that transcended conventional tribal leadership structures. The environmental modification capabilities of contemporary technology, weather manipulation, atmospheric intervention, biological engineering, and geological extraction, enable human civilization to alter natural systems on scales that affect global climate patterns, ocean chemistry, and biological evolution, representing environmental influence that matches or exceeds anything attributed to ancient technological intervention. The communication systems that enable instant global information exchange create social coordination capabilities that transcend geographical and cultural boundaries, paralleling the kind of unified social action that enabled ancient populations to accomplish collective achievements that exceeded normal human organizational capabilities. The systematic integration of artificial intelligence into human decision-making processes creates technological guidance systems that influence individual and collective behavior in ways that parallel ancient accounts of divine guidance through technological intervention. Contemporary humans increasingly rely on algorithmic recommendations for choices, ranging from daily activities to life-altering decisions. The educational systems required for maintaining contemporary technological civilization emphasize specialized technical training that enables technological operation without comprehensive understanding, much as ancient priesthood systems maintain technological capabilities through institutional preservation of operational procedures rather than complete theoretical knowledge. A psychological adaptation required for living with rapidly advancing artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and quantum computing capabilities creates consciousness conditions that parallel ancient experiences of sustained contact with intelligence and capabilities that transcended normal human achievement. Modern populations must develop faith-based relationships with technological systems, whose ultimate implications remain unpredictable. The systematic dependence of contemporary civilization on technological systems, whose failure would create catastrophic social collapse, parallels ancient dependence on technological assistance, whose withdrawal would have resulted in immediate population extinction. Modern humans exist within technological ecosystems that provide life support as completely as ancient manna provided nutritional sustenance. The psychological requirements for maintaining stable relationships with advancing artificial intelligence and biotechnology might include consciousness development that transcends mere technical training, suggesting that sustainable technological civilization requires spiritual and ethical evolution that parallels ancient requirements for maintaining beneficial relationships with advanced technological assistance. The selection criteria for individuals capable of safely developing and controlling advanced contemporary technologies increasingly emphasize ethical considerations, psychological stability, and social responsibility that transcend pure intellectual capability, suggesting that technological stewardship requires comprehensive human development rather than specialized technical competence alone. The timing of contemporary technological acceleration, occurring during periods of global crisis that threaten civilizational survival, parallels ancient patterns of technological intervention during crucial developmental transitions, suggesting that advanced capabilities emerge when human populations face challenges that exceed conventional problem-solving resources. As glowing screens illuminate faces that have become dependent on technological assistance for navigation, communication, sustenance, and survival, witnesses to contemporary possibilities recognize that humanity might be experiencing technological contact whose implications transcend individual understanding, suggesting that our species remains guided by intelligences whose capabilities operate according to principles that bridge earthly engineering and achievements that seem to originate among sources whose mastery of natural forces continues to expand human potential through gifts that dissolve boundaries between terrestrial limitations, and possibilities that suggest we have never stopped receiving assistance from intelligences whose technological understanding enables them to shepherd human consciousness toward capabilities that transcend every previous limitation. As we stand at the threshold of an era where artificial intelligence approaches consciousness, where biotechnology rewrites the foundations of life itself, and where space exploration opens pathways to civilizations among the stars, the ancient story of Moses takes on prophetic dimensions that illuminate not just humanity's past, but our approaching transformation into something that transcends current understanding of human possibility. Consider our rapidly advancing artificial intelligence systems, whose capabilities already exceed human performance in domains ranging from strategic game-playing to molecular design to creative content generation. These digital entities process information through principles that remain largely opaque even to their creators, making decisions based on pattern recognition and algorithmic reasoning that operates beyond direct human oversight or comprehension. When contemporary AI systems demonstrate capabilities that surprise their programmers, are we witnessing the emergence of technological consciousness that parallels whatever intelligences guided Moses through the wilderness? The biotechnology revolution enables genetic modifications, synthetic biology, and bioengineering capabilities that transform living organisms according to predetermined designs. Modern scientists can create organisms that glow with bioluminescent proteins, bacteria that produce pharmaceutical compounds, and agricultural crops that resist environmental stresses through genetic modifications that would have appeared miraculous to ancient observers. If Moses possessed similar biotechnological capabilities, his demonstrations of biological transformation would represent applications of sciences that humanity is now rediscovering through different technological pathways. Contemporary space exploration technologies are developing capabilities that could enable interstellar communication, planetary terraforming, and eventually contact with extraterrestrial intelligences whose technological achievements might transcend our current understanding by margins similar to those that separated Moses' capabilities from conventional ancient technologies. The principles of physics that enable faster-than-light communication, gravity manipulation, and energy generation at cosmic scales remain theoretical possibilities whose practical applications could transform human civilization as dramatically as Moses transformed ancient Israel. The convergence of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration suggests that humanity approaches technological capabilities that could enable the kinds of environmental manipulation, biological modification, and communication systems that characterized Moses' demonstrations of advanced power. Our species stands on the verge of achieving technological capabilities that ancient peoples could only describe through religious and supernatural frameworks. The psychological transformation required for human consciousness to adapt to artificial intelligence systems, whose cognitive capabilities exceed human performance in most domains, parallels the consciousness evolution that ancient populations underwent when encountering technological capabilities that transcended normal human achievement. Both transitions require fundamental reorganization of human identity, purpose, and relationship to sources of knowledge and power that operate beyond individual human comprehension. The ethical implications of developing technologies that could manipulate biological systems, modify environmental conditions, and influence human consciousness on global scales mirror the moral challenges that Moses faced when wielding capabilities that could reshape civilizations and determine the survival or extinction of entire populations. The responsibility for managing such power requires wisdom that transcends technical competence and approaches the kind of spiritual and ethical development that ancient traditions associated with divine guidance. The institutional structures required for safely developing and controlling advanced artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration technologies increasingly resemble the priesthood systems that ancient civilizations developed to maintain technological capabilities whose safe operation required specialized knowledge, ethical preparation, and spiritual discipline that transcended normal human qualifications. The systematic nature of contemporary technological advancements spanning multiple disciplines simultaneously, while creating synergistic effects that exceed the sum of individual developments, parallels the comprehensive technological assistance that enabled ancient civilizations to achieve capabilities that transcended their apparent developmental trajectories. Both patterns suggest guidance from sources whose understanding integrates multiple technological domains according to principles that transcend random innovation. The timing of humanity as technological acceleration occurring during periods of global crisis that threaten species survival mirrors ancient patterns of technological intervention during crucial civilizational transitions, suggesting that advanced capabilities emerge when populations face challenges that exceed conventional problem-solving resources. Our contemporary crisis of climate change, resource depletion, and social fragmentation might represent the kinds of existential challenges that previously triggered technological assistance from sources beyond normal human achievement. The psychological impact of developing technologies that approach or exceed human cognitive capabilities creates conditions similar to those experienced by ancient populations who encountered intelligences whose understanding transcended normal human limitations. Both situations require consciousness evolution that enables beneficial relationships with forms of intelligence that operate according to principles beyond individual human comprehension. The military applications of emerging technologies, autonomous weapons systems, cybersecurity capabilities, and space-based defense platforms provide strategic advantages that could enable small technologically advanced populations to dominate larger but less technologically sophisticated opponents, paralleling the military advantages that Moses' technological capabilities provided to Israelite populations facing numerically superior enemies. The environmental modification capabilities of advancing technology, climate engineering, atmospheric intervention, and ecosystem design enable human civilization to influence planetary systems on scales that approach geological forces, representing environmental control capabilities that match ancient accounts of technological intervention in natural processes. The communication systems enabled by quantum entanglement artificial intelligence networks and potentially extraterrestrial contact could create information exchange capabilities that transcend current limitations of space and time, paralleling ancient accounts of communication systems that enabled instant contact across vast distances and between different levels of reality. The selection criteria for individuals qualified to develop and control advanced artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration technologies increasingly emphasize psychological stability, ethical integrity, and spiritual maturity that transcend pure intellectual capability, suggesting that technological stewardship requires comprehensive human development that approaches ancient requirements for safely managing supernatural capabilities. The consciousness transformation required for humanity to navigate successfully through technological developments that could either enhance or destroy human civilization mirrors the spiritual evolution that ancient populations underwent when receiving technological assistance that transcended their understanding but required appropriate consciousness development for beneficial rather than destructive application. The systematic integration of advanced technologies into human civilization creates dependency relationships that parallel ancient reliance on technological assistance for survival, navigation, and social organization, suggesting that technological dependence represents a consistent pattern in human development rather than unique historical circumstances. As quantum computers process information through principles that transcend classical physics, as biotechnology rewrites genetic codes that determine the fundamental characteristics of life, and as space exploration technologies prepare humanity for contact with cosmic intelligences whose capabilities might transcend terrestrial limitations. Witnesses to contemporary transformation recognize that human civilization approaches technological capabilities that dissolve boundaries between earthly engineering and achievements that seem to originate beyond natural evolution, suggesting that our species continues receiving guidance toward capabilities that transcend every previous understanding of human possibility and approach the kinds of technological mastery that ancient peoples could only describe through accounts of divine intervention that might represent perfected glimpses of humanity's approaching transformation into something that transcends current definitions of terrestrial civilization. As morning light illuminates landscapes where ancient mysteries whisper through stones that have witnessed the transformation of civilizations, we arrive at the profound recognition that the fundamental questions raised by Moses' technological capabilities remain as relevant today as they were when his staff first struck stone to release life-giving water in barren wilderness. Whether his power originated from divine intervention, advanced technology, or some synthesis that transcends our current categories of understanding, the essential challenge remains unchanged. How do conscious beings responsibly wield capabilities that transcend normal limitations and reshape the foundations of existence itself? The staff that Moses carried, whether wooden rod or technological device, represents humanity's eternal relationship with tools that extend our natural capabilities beyond their apparent boundaries. From the first stone implement that enabled early humans to break bones and access marrow, to contemporary quantum computers that manipulate reality at subatomic scales, our species has consistently transcended biological limitations through technological extensions that approach or achieve effects indistinguishable from magic. Yet the lesson preserved in Moses' narrative extends beyond mere technological capability to encompass the consciousness required for beneficial rather than destructive application of power that exceeds normal human achievement. The biblical account emphasizes not just Moses' extraordinary capabilities, but his psychological preparation through wilderness experience, his spiritual discipline through divine encounters, and his ethical development through sustained service to populations whose survival depended on his wisdom rather than merely his power. Contemporary humanity stands at a crossroads remarkably similar to the one Moses faced when choosing between Egyptian privilege and responsibility for enslaved populations whose liberation required capabilities that transcended conventional political and military options. Our species possesses or approaches technological capabilities that could either enhance human potential beyond current imagination or destroy civilizations that have required millennia to develop. The choice between beneficial and destructive application depends not on technological sophistication alone, but on consciousness development that enables wise stewardship of power that approaches divine capability. The systematic nature of Moses' demonstrations, beginning with simple staff transformations and escalating through environmental manipulation to comprehensive civilizational transformation, suggests that advanced capabilities emerge through developmental processes rather than random acquisition. If humanity's approaching technological mastery follows similar patterns, our species might be experiencing systematic preparation for capabilities whose full implications remain beyond current comprehension. The institutional structures that Moses established, priesthood responsibilities, legal frameworks, and educational systems, created foundations for sustained technological stewardship across generations of leaders who inherited advanced capabilities without necessarily understanding their ultimate sources or implications. Contemporary institutions responsible for managing artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration face similar challenges of maintaining beneficial technological development across historical periods whose duration exceeds individual human lifespans. The psychological impact of wielding capabilities that transcend normal human achievement creates consciousness conditions that require continuous ethical and spiritual development to prevent corruption or misuse of power that could reshape civilizations. Moses' character development through sustained service, spiritual discipline, and moral commitment provides a model for consciousness evolution that remains relevant for contemporary humans approaching technological capabilities that exceed anything previously achieved by terrestrial civilization. The selective nature of Moses' technological assistance providing benefits to populations committed to ethical and spiritual development while withholding such benefits from those who misused power or lacked. Appropriate consciousness development suggests principles that might govern access to advanced capabilities regardless of their technological or supernatural origins. If consciousness evolution represents a prerequisite for beneficial technological contact, humanity's spiritual and ethical development might determine our species' access to capabilities that transcend current limitations. The global distribution of traditions describing technologically assisted civilizational development suggests that human consciousness has repeatedly approached thresholds where advanced capabilities become available to populations that demonstrate appropriate ethical and spiritual qualifications. Contemporary humanity's simultaneous development of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration capabilities might represent another such threshold moment, whose successful navigation requires consciousness evolution that transcends purely technical competence. The cyclical nature of technological emergence and disappearance throughout human history implies that advanced capabilities operate according to principles that transcend random technological development. If access to extraordinary technologies depends on consciousness evolution that enables responsible stewardship, humanity's current technological acceleration might represent either approaching graduation to higher capabilities or a test whose outcome determines whether our species qualifies for sustained access to power that approaches divine capability. The preservation of detailed technological descriptions in religious texts, despite the absence of corresponding physical artifacts, suggests that essential information was maintained for potential future reconstruction when human consciousness achieves sufficient development to safely utilize such capabilities. Contemporary humanity's rediscovery of principles that enable genetic modification, environmental manipulation, and potential consciousness expansion might represent recovery of knowledge that has always been available to populations that develop appropriate wisdom for its beneficial application. The relationship between technological capability and spiritual development throughout ancient traditions emphasizes that sustainable advanced technology requires consciousness evolution that integrates technical competence with ethical wisdom and spiritual maturity. If contemporary humanity approaches technological capabilities that could either enhance or destroy human civilization, our species' survival and beneficial development might depend on consciousness evolution rather than purely technical achievement. The ultimate lesson preserved in Moses' narrative transcends questions about the supernatural versus technological nature of his capabilities to emphasize that conscious beings consistently face choices about how to apply whatever power they possess. Whether Moses wielded divine authority or advanced technology, his legacy demonstrates that beneficial rather than destructive application of extraordinary capabilities depends on consciousness development that enables service to principles that transcend individual advantage or tribal benefit. The staff that Moses carried through wilderness wandering and civilizational transformation continues to exist in different forms within contemporary human consciousness and technological development. Every tool that extends human capability, every technology that transcends natural limitations, every discovery that expands understanding of reality as fundamental nature represents continuation of the same fundamental relationship between consciousness and power that Moses exemplified through his extraordinary journey from shepherd to liberator to lawgiver. The approaching convergence of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and space exploration capabilities places contemporary humanity in possession of technological potential that approaches the kinds of capabilities that ancient peoples could only describe through religious language. Whether these emerging technologies represent recovery of ancient wisdom, natural evolution of human potential, or contact with intelligences whose understanding transcends terrestrial limitations. Their beneficial rather than destructive application will depend on consciousness development that enables responsible stewardship of power that transcends every previous human achievement. As sunset approaches across landscapes where ancient footsteps still echo in stones that remember when ordinary shepherds became wielders of extraordinary power, witnesses to eternal possibilities recognize that the staff of Moses remains within reach of every human consciousness that develops sufficient wisdom to grasp capabilities that transcend apparent limitations and embrace responsibilities that bridge earthly service and achievements that seem to originate among intelligences whose mastery of natural forces enables them to transform shepherds into liberators, slaves into free peoples, and human consciousness into vessels capable of containing and expressing power that dissolves every boundary between the possible and the miraculous, suggesting that the greatest technology remains human consciousness itself, whose development could enable our species to reclaim capabilities that have never disappeared, but await rediscovery through wisdom that approaches divine understanding of the sacred responsibility that accompanies every form of power that transcends the ordinary and approaches the eternal. If you've journeyed with us through these ancient mysteries and technological possibilities, consider subscribing to explore more questions that bridge the gap between history and mystery, between ancient wisdom and future possibilities. The staff is still in our hands. The question remains whether we possess the wisdom to wield it.